You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver Media Podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Miss V Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. CanadianTarot.com, your uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community and forum, and the Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from fresh farm ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. Well, good morning.
We're live.
And hello, kids. And welcome to Season 3 and episode number 158 of the Daily Beaver Morning Show here on the Crier Media Network. Today, recording day is Friday, July 7th, 2023. And all damn day, there will be risk of thunderstorms here at the Beaver Lodge. There was supposed to be some overnight. They did not happen. Oh well, we'll see what we get. I'm your host, the Eager Beaver, pronouns he, him, hey, Mr. Beaver, eh? And with me, as always, is my dear friend, Mr. Grizzly. Of course, a big thank you goes to our podcast founding sponsors, the Peppermaster, the Miss V Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, and CanadianTarot.com. We have a very, very special Friday morning Beaver Bite for you, because we have not only Mr. Grizzly here, but a special guest, Mr. Evan Scrimshaw. Yes, but before we have him in, we do our most important thing and ask Mr. Grizzly, how's your mental health today, sir?
Well, good morning, Mr. Beaver. My mental health this morning, when I wake up, I'll let you know. I'm just a zombie this morning. The alarm went off at 5, as it does, every day. And I looked at it and went, nope, and hit snooze. 6 o'clock, it went off, the secondary alarm. I looked at it and went, nope, and hit snooze 3 more times until 6:30 when I rolled my lazy ass out of bed and crawled over to the computer and logged on. So I'm not awake yet. I'm going to have to make I've got my carafe has at least one more mug of coffee. I'm going to have to make a full pot just to get through it. Because, it is a Friday. We've got lots of time today, and I'm working from home. And it's also, the countdown has begun because 4:30, my vacation begins.
Ooh.
So I'm pretty excited about that.
Ooh. And here's
the idea of having no responsibilities other than this show, but this is it.
Mm-hmm.
This is a joy, right?
Right.
It's work, but this is a joy. And don't get me wrong, I love my day job, but you need it. You get a break from time to time. Yeah, it's vacation.
Okay, Mr. Grizzly needs a keg of coffee for his desk.
Yes, I do. I do. I
Chug,
think I need a
chug,
bigger
chug,
desk,
chug.
actually, because I'm running out of space here with all the gear I keep adding. I just need a bigger desk. Anyway,
I can
why
just
don't
imagine you
we
doing a headstand on a keg of coffee.
keg stand? Keg stand.
Before we bring Evan in, just got a couple of things in the news
Oh, okay.
that our kids should know. The 3 territories all signed on to Ottawa's health offer yesterday. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau presented it to them in February, and the territorial leaders had asked for extra money to pay for medical travel and other costs of delivering healthcare in the north. It's actually a side agreement because the per capita funding doesn't grow as fast for the north, and there's extra costs. So there's a separate agreement. So Quebec is now the only holdout.
Well,
one by one.
let's see what
Just
happens.
let you know, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Kids. We've had him on before. And as Kit James says, tonight is the triumphant return of your eager beaver on Casual Friday, y'all. But we've had him on before. We love him very, very much.
One of my favorite writers, like
yes.
literally. And
yes.
I don't say that easily, especially when, he's in the green room, so he can see and hear everything we're talking about.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
You literally are one of my favorite writers, sir. I love your style. I love your prose, and I love what you have to say. Don't always agree with you, but that's fine. I don't have to, right?
Well, nobody always agrees with me, but I am surprised and pleased, because I respect him, how often we are in very violent agreement. So let's have them on. Kits and cubs, peeps and poops, please put your hands together and give a round of applause to Mr. Evan Scrimshaw. Hello, sir.
In Mr. Incognito mode.
Yes, Mr. Incognito mode.
Good morning, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Thanks
I'm
for
doing
joining
well.
us.
This is far too early in the morning, but I'm glad to do this.
I completely agree with you, my friend, but I don't know what happened. At sometime in my mid-40s, I started waking up early in the morning and having supper at 4 p.m. No, not that bad. The reason I was an owl when I was younger.
At least there's...
I've become an early bird all of a sudden for some reason. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, well, at least there's tennis on right now, so it's not a
total
at least
loss.
can put that on the background while we do this.
How is your vacation? Because you really earned that one.
Yeah, the post Alberta wind down was very necessary and very important. Definitely needed to just get away and not be in and around the usual stuff anymore. It was campaigns are always exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
A campaign where I was being accused of being a conservative for the last 2 weeks of it because because I had the temerity to live in reality. That is substantially more exhausting than usual. So it was good to wind down.
You heard it here, folks. You heard it here first, kids. Now, today, with noted conservative commentator Evan Scrimshaw.
I'm going to borrow that from you, sir. The temerity to live in reality. I like that.
I mean, the day I was accused of election interference to try and help the conservatives, I was just like, well, something has jumped the shark here because.
Oh my God, that is.
I'm usually being accused of being a communist.
Yeah.
Right. My God, that's such a proof that we're in this era now where people will say anything. Writing an article is now election interference in favor of someone. You turn around and you have, like you say, the temerity to live in reality and say, even though I'm not conservative, the non-conservative option screwed the pooch on this election. And then all of a sudden you get branded, right? Yeah. It's like the people just, yesterday, right, we had that incident on the TTC, and we had people tweeting life in Olivia Chow's Toronto. It's like, dude, she doesn't take office until like July 12th. Did she fucking time travel?
Yeah.
Like what? Did she have a little everything everywhere all at once going on?
Yeah.
It was like, what, did she enter the multiverse? Like, what the hell? It's like you're so. That's what I'm saying. People are just rushed to say absolutely everything, or like slap happy when we had the bus accident in Manitoba. Oh, life in Trudeau's Canada. It's a freaking bus accident, you twit.
I mean, that was after the Toronto campaign, which I didn't really cover, thankfully, so
Yeah.
I didn't have an aneurysm, where conservatives kept pretending they hadn't been governing Toronto for the last 13 years.
Yeah,
Right.
shit.
And it's just like, no, we can't let the left continue to cause Toronto's decline. Continue? What are we talking about here? What are we talking about? Continue. The last time the left was in office was 2010. Like, it's just absolutely wild these days. And like, good thing I'm back from vacation, because Canadian politics still as stupid as it was when I left.
What is it?
Well,
What is
right,
it that
and
they
it-
used
it-
to accuse Steve Jobs of? The reality distortion factor? Because he'd say, this thing we've just created here at Apple for the new iPhone that nobody else has. It's like, they've had that. Everybody else has had that for years. The reality distortion factor. The conservatives seem to be fully ensconced in that world.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not far from that at this point, like, for various reasons.
All right, so let's go through a few things, because we've been taking clips from your articles and saving them for your visit. You had a piece right after the Alberta election. You had a review and you said that the NDP deserved to fail here, right? Why?
Because anytime you talk to anybody sort of peripherally involved in Alberta politics for the 18 months before the election, you would get this, there would be this sort of ephemeral language that you would hear of like, yeah, not sure the NDP are doing this, not sure they're really taking advantage. And I would write about Alberta fairly frequently, partially because it really just intrigues me, but also partially because I am a left winger and I wasn't in love with the NDP strategy. It was like a little bit of a way for me to, I don't want to say flash my sort of my left punching sort of credentials, but it was a valuable thing to do to show that I can be critical of both sides.
Right.
And I would get these DMs and I would get these things from people sort of peripherally in and around Alberta politics. And sometimes you think that when you're getting these insiders, they'll be like, actually, you don't understand it. And what I'd get is variations of, how do you understand Alberta politics so well when you're so far away? And every time I heard from somebody, it was, how do you understand this better than the people running the NDP campaign? And consistently, every single time I would write about it, I would get some variation on that response. And it's like, okay, so they've been told this. They've been told, maybe not because of my columns, like I'm not going to overrate my influence, but clearly people whose influence matters, clearly people who have a role in an understanding in Alberta politics have been saying similar things to me. And if they just consistently don't listen to smart people who are telling them that you're not in a winning position because you fail for these specific reasons, and then you fail for the exact reasons everyone said you were going to fail the entire time, yeah, you deserve to lose. You deserve to lose because at some point it becomes your arrogance that you just don't want. You don't want to change what you're doing to win. And you don't want to admit that you were wrong, and you don't want to admit it. And if you don't want to admit it, then that's fine. You don't have to admit it. But I don't have to sit here and pretend that you losing to Danielle Smith is an impressive performance.
Right.
It wasn't.
Right. I mean, she gained seats and whatnot, but it wasn't an impressive performance because there was an ability to actually unseat the government there. In your article, you write, I'm going to quote you here. The reason the NDP lost isn't about any of the convenient narratives that will pop up in time. It's about a singular fact. They didn't give Alberta anything proactively to vote for. They had a few half measures designed to peel off a few half measures, and the contraceptives policy was actually genuinely good, but there was no overarching message or ideal. There was no narrative about the campaign except Danielle Smith is bad, and there were a lot of unanswered questions. And you mentioned this because I'm seeing parallels with the Ontario election with Andrea Horwath. Also didn't really have an offer. Also, pretty much only Doug Ford is bad. And I'm watching it. You had an article later on when you're talking about Jenny Byrne and how basically, she pooches most campaigns she's involved in. And you got Pierre Poilievre going, and it seems that the campaign again is just Justin Trudeau bad. Like, we see this over and over and over again. I'm just going to run a campaign about demonizing the other guy and offer nothing. Put nothing in the window, no reason to vote for me. Why do people keep on making this stupid mistake, in your opinion, Evan? We know this doesn't work.
Because it's a lot easier to coalesce sort of wildly different parts of a coalition around our enemy sucks, right? What connects the much more left-wing Edmontonian parts of the Alberta NDP to the sort of Calgarian, more right-wing, especially more right-wing on economics? It's that they hate Danielle Smith. It's the thing that keeps Horwath's coalition of, Toronto urbanites and voters in Oshawa and Niagara and Windsor together. It's Doug Ford's, and conservatism is, not the right answer. And the thing is, the second you have to articulate a policy agenda for yourself, that becomes harder, because you then have to make choices that nate parts of your potential coalition. If Andrew Horwath actually comes out with a policy platform, or Merritt Stiles, who's the new NDP leader, who will face the same dilemma in 3 years. Yeah, 3 years. Cool. The policies that are popular are in downtown Toronto that help you in your NDP liberal battles are not necessarily the same that are going to be helpful to you in your conservative battles in Oshawa and Niagara and Windsor. And the problem, and so it's just easy to focus on sort of like overall, oh yeah, the opposition's bad, or the government's bad, the party I'm running against is bad, because then you don't have to do the hard work of figuring out, so how do I create a coalition that's going to work for everything? And the thing about the federal conservatives is they really don't have an answer, because they're trying to keep a policy agenda between like people who are, frankly not that mad at the Liberals about the policy agenda, but just mad about sort of general ethics. They think that there's something sort of wrong. The Liberals are not coming out clean necessarily out of the China stuff. And then of course their base that they're trying to keep from going to the PPC, who think that Justin Trudeau is literally Fidel Castro's kid and Satan incarnate.
He's gonna get your kids hooked on drugs.
He's gonna make them trans.
Yes,
and get him hooked on the drugs. He's on the marijuana.
He's on the pot. Get him off the pot. He's not making.
So the thing is, I went to university with a guy who's now like a fairly senior advisor in the conservative operation, and it's one of those things where like I don't want to, like, I don't say that to be like no beer, but like I haven't spoken to the guy in years, but went to university with him, used to get drunk with him, and Ottawa. It was a fun time for all involved. That sort of like that inner circle, Jenny Byrne, my guy, Poilievre, it's a very cutthroat. It's a very like, we'll do whatever it takes to win group. And the thing is, now them willing to do anything to win doesn't mean that the decisions they are making are going to work. But it is notable that like part of the reason I think Poilievre is sort of coming out with no actual policy is that they don't know what policy is going to work, and they don't want to box themselves in to a corner that they therefore are going to be stuck in until it's too late.
Well, the thing is that as you were talking about Jagmeet Singh in an article, I think it was like NDP Irrelevance, Here We Come. And he said, At some point, we have to acknowledge that Jagmeet's role as a leader that is broadly inoffensive to a large swath of Liberal voters isn't a good strategy for the NDP, because the voters who like Jagmeet won't actually vote for his party, either because of first past the post or genuinely preferring Trudeau. And in that case, running a leader this Liberal friendly, this urban focused, and this elite will have the effect of ending careers in Northern Ontario and non-Vancouver BC. We have a Conservative Party that is prioritizing Kootenay over Kitchener, and an NDP leader who seems willing to cede that ground in a futile attempt to go from 10% to 14% in Oakville. And if they wanted to save their asses, they'd replace Jagmeet with Angus for whatever my big L Liberal readers think is their best chance at keeping their small town working class seats and reducing the Tory numbers. But they won't, because they're either idiots or cowards. The NDP might be polling great right now, but it's a fugazi. Jagmeet's by-election performances show the NDP is on track for a very bad night whenever he forces an election, and the NDP will pay the price for his ego and their cowardice in getting rid of a staggeringly incompetent clown. But at least their incompetence should put the risk of a vote splitting between the Tories to bed. Now, I'm reading this, right? And you also mentioned there are half a dozen NDP MPs who should be praying this parliament goes as long as possible, just to ensure they're dead as soon as they get to the polls. Given that there is no real reason whatsoever that I can see for the NDP to pull the plug before this confidence and supply agreement goes the full 4 years. I mean, I can understand that the Conservatives are not going to put out any policy, because I mean, why would you put something out for somebody to punch at 2 years before it's going to happen? But you also can't do 2 years of every single day, the sun came up, damn you, Trudeau. That's not sustainable either. So what do they do in the meantime?
Well, I mean, their policy is bring it home. That's their policy. That's their platform. Bring it home. Bring home freedom to Canada. Bring home They have nothing. Nothing. All they want to do is win at any cost and say the stupidest goddamn things I've ever heard in my life coming out of the mouth of a politician. And we lived through the Trump years. But they're saying even stupider shit on a constant basis. Powerful paychecks. What the fuck is that?
So I was just wondering. Yeah,
what they need to hope for is that they're just going to keep getting like China shit to come. And I know it's not necessarily China, but they need sort of like stuff that can keep knocking the government off its message and off key. Because part of the reason they've been able to sustain this sort of policy light, sort of, we're just going to keep saying bring it home or whatever, is because for the last 4 months, the Liberals have not been on message, because they have been responding to the Sam Cooper, Bob Fife story of the day for the last 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
If the Liberals can sort of punt the issue into the long grass, it's going to be harder for Poilievre to sort of maintain that, just solely because he's not going to be able to rely on the Liberals being consistently knocked off message. Presumably coming soon. We haven't seen it, but all indications are it's coming, and that right now basically the Liberals are just at the finalizing the shuffle bit of the cycle. In the fall, that's A, less stupid, and B, does not have Mark Mendocino to make an asset of himself on a daily basis. And if they're on better message, then Poilievre isn't going to be able to just walk all over. Isn't just going to be able to walk all over the messy stuff, because so much of what Poilievre is getting away with is just sort of basic Liberal comms failure, right? It's Mendocino not being prepared for what was always going to be a controversial political event, the Bernardo stuff, which meant that became a 5-day story instead of a half of a day story, if they had a competent minister who had a competent comms strategy.
Yep. Because I've heard since then that because I wondered out loud why was Corrections Service Canada, doing follow-up, because they hadn't heard. Well, apparently the director of Correctional Service Canada did about 4 days before they wrote, says, we're really sending you this. And then apparently Now, from what I can tell, it wouldn't have been odd for the Prime Minister to know only the day before, because there's nothing that the government can do. It was really a situation where you just like, you need to know this is happening. Here are your media lines. Say them. And Correctional Service Canada actually supplied the media lines. So they were out there, right? So you can understand that. But Mendocino, right? You think he would have known a little bit before, or staff would have told him. Now, the story is that the staff were trying to find out whether or not he could do something, which again struck me as very weird, because what universe are we ever taught that the Minister of Public Safety can actually directly interfere in a Correctional Service of Canada decision? But then they say they found out that they couldn't, and therefore didn't tell him. I mean, you still got to tell them that this is happening tomorrow when you need your media lines, right? And that's where I jump off on this story. It's like that part. I can make the rest of it make sense somehow. I can't make that part make sense. And it seems that when he said that he didn't find out, the Director of Correctional Services Canada sent another email and goes, "Did you not tell the minister this?" It's like,
well, yeah, and I think that's the thing about Mendocino is that he is a minister who runs a department in such a way as to not be told things, which is not a good thing and is not a compliment.
No, because the event's going to happen.
The thing about the NDP.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about the NDP, like they're walking into an absolute shit show whenever they go to whenever they go to an election, and they are tricking themselves with these run of good polls that mean absolutely nothing. Because we all know that what happens second that anyone think about the actual prospect of actually is the NDP vote collapses, the Liberals go back to whatever they were, and voter attention sort of snapped. We saw it in 2021 when, sort of, pandemic high meant that, the Liberals were surging, right? And, the Conservatives were, in the, high 20s. And the campaign sort of gets snapped in, and people, and, traditional Conservatives go, actually, no, I'm not going to vote for Justin Trudeau. I'm just going to vote for a Conservative because I'm a goddamn Conservative. And the NDP vote fell away, because I remember I wrote a mid-early 2021 being like, this might actually be the year where the NDP don't massively underperform their poll. No, it wasn't the year they don't massively underperform their polls, because they massively underperform their polls every year. It's the most reliable thing you can bet on in Canadian politics. Taxes, and the NDP will do worse on election day than they do 2 months out. The only time that wasn't true was 2011. But
right.
If you're really betting on Dayton, like Jack, that was a once in a lifetime circumstance and a once in a lifetime opportunity that is not going to be here in 2020, in 2024, 2025. And if you think it is, you are just deluding yourself.
You've given me a lot of different threads, and I actually made a couple of notes. When you were talking about pumping the issue of the public inquiry into the long grass, I'm wondering if that's what's happening now. I was wondering on your thoughts about that, because right now we have a situation where David Johnston has been rejected, and he's gone now, and now we have to find a way forward. And we have three different parties that are proposing, I guess, three different approaches. The Bloc Québécois kind of made a faceplant by suggesting names that they didn't do a basic Google search for, and said, well, what about Louise Arbour? Oh, well, she was a mentor at the Trudeau Foundation too. Okay, so I guess you took that really seriously. And then you have the Conservatives saying that they don't want to lift a finger to help until the Prime Minister already commits to a public inquiry. The NDP seems to be saying that they want a commitment to a public inquiry before they propose names, but they're at least helping. Dominic LeBlanc says that conversations are going well with the Bloc and the NDP, and they're arriving at some sort of consensus. But you got Polliver, who's again saying, well, nope, I'm not going to participate in any terms of reference. I'm not going to participate in any names unless, I've put this condition here that you need to meet, or else I'm going to be completely unhelpful, which kind of makes him, again, a whole gatekeeper on the process. So he put out this thing yesterday saying, here's a letter that says that the Prime Minister has the sole authority to declare a full public inquiry. Well, nobody said he didn't. The point is that when you exercised a veto on the choice like you did the last time in the way that you did the last time, it kind of becomes your duty on a matter that is apparently as allegedly important as foreign influence in our elections. You think he might want to solve that issue before the next election or take some, steps. And he's just basically gone completely limp and has made himself dead weight and is dragging the process down and making sure that it can't happen as fast as it should. So you have him on one hand having a narrative that we absolutely must do something, but he's not doing anything whatsoever to make it happen. And it just seems to me that the more time that goes by before there's actually a process that's determined in terms of reference into the pool of candidates that they could possibly agree on and vet and then possibly agree on, that this story might just like go into the churn and just kind of disappear and nobody will call for it anymore.
Well, I mean, it's one of these things where like Polyev has a very it's like a sensible tactic, but it's a bad strategy, right? Which is
right.
It's very
because they don't really want
right?
an inquiry. Pardon?
Well, because they can't control an inquiry, right? They can't. They don't know what's going to come, and I heavily suspect that a lot of the overzealous an inquiry is going to find Justin Trudeau guilty of knowingly collaborating with the Chinese. Like, no. The thing the Liberals might be guilty about is not taking it seriously enough because it was helping them. That's the thing you can maybe get them on. But the idea that like they're knowingly collaborating with fucking Beijing is it's laughable nonsense. And I think they are coming to realize that this is not going to be the sort of like slam dunk that they want. But they want their cake and they want to eat it too, right? They want a public inquiry, but they also want to be able to criticize a public inquiry as essentially a sham process if that process ends with the Liberals coming out of it in a political sense, okay, right? Because they want, which is why they don't want to commit to a name. They don't want to say, oh, put, I don't know, insert conservative Supreme Court by Stephen Harper, and we'll send to the process, or run Ambrose or James Moore. I don't really know name, right? Pick a conservative name, but a sort of like sensible, non-partisan, someone who has sort of credibility on all sides. Because if James Moore or Rona Ambrose or insert, Supreme Court pick here comes back and says, actually, the Liberals, there were some long-standing issues, and some of their reporting stuff wasn't great, but like most of what Sam Cooper's reported is dog shit. Pardon my swearing, and they didn't actually abandon their duty of care. They want the option to still say, but it's a rigged process because you appointed some dastardly liberal, which is just proof that they're unserious and they don't actually care about the public. But advertising that you are at faith is not usually good politics.
Yeah, but I mean, the acting in bad faith is not good politics. But what about the narrative? What about somebody going, you say that there's election interference that's so bad that we need to do something about it, but you want an election before we do. How does that make sense?
I mean, that also doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, yeah,
that's something
I can't figure out if that's. I can't figure out if that's if that works as an argument, or if the counterpoint is that if you follow the logic that Justin Trudeau is a traitor and therefore we need to get him out of office as quickly as possible. I don't believe Trudeau's a traitor. I'm just saying, given the conservative logic of the last few months, you are the Conservatives have essentially accused him of treason in many words.
Yep, absolutely. In your story about this, sorry, not your story, your piece about this, you say, I'm unsure of the value of a public inquiry at this point, but it's the will of the House of Commons that there should be one, so we should have one. At this point, there's been two stories mixed together, which is Bob Feiss and Global's reporting, mostly centered on what China has tried to do and our institutional failures to solve any of it. And then Sam Cooper's bullshit. Cooper's bullshit has been found out to be that, but it's obscuring that there are a lot of real issues here. And this is where I want to chat with you about Sam Cooper specifically, because I don't know him very well. But it seemed that the reporting was kind of a little weird, and all of a sudden there's a lawsuit, and he's left Global, and he's working with this thing called the Bureau that I've never heard of before. He moved there. Why was Sam Cooper's reporting bullshit?
Because it didn't pass like basic stress tests if you thought about it for more than 2 seconds. And the thing about every Sam Cooper sort of like story would drop, usually it would be like 5 o'clock on a whatever day of the week. And like you read it and you're like, oh shit, that's really bad. If that's true, that's like really, really bad. And then you read the story and you read the tweets and you look at it and you go, well, that doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense, and that doesn't make sense. So like the first one, Han Dong being sort of flagged by CSIS as this like surprising and ambitious nomination candidate in Don Valley. Is it? He's a Chinese Canadian MPP from downtown who looked at his prospects, given that Adam Vaughan just newly sort of encased himself in that downtown seat, and everyone thought Adam Vaughan there for 20 years. And he's like, oh shit, I can run up to the Don Valley to get a seat. Like, I don't know, that wasn't that shocking. Like, and the thing is, if CSIS's sort of internal sort of like, if CSIS is leaking that part of their logic for doing this is that he's suspicious because of that, it's like, well, that doesn't really make any sense. And then so that's what we're relying on. And then just the other stuff doesn't make sense. They didn't independently verify any of the financial claims in another story.
Right.
And then the thing that got me is sort of, there was a looseness to the reporting. There was a sort of cavalier indifference to laying out all of the specific details.
Right.
Especially like the Two Michaels story, right? Where, allegedly
Right.
Han Dong said to the Chinese, don't release the Two Michaels, it'll hurt the government politically to release them.
How would that be
that
possible?
Story did not ever, well, yeah, but even ignoring that, like, that story does not tell us whether so it does not say it was a wiretap. It's sort of implied by later reporting by the Globe that it was, but we don't know if it was a wiretap, and we still don't know if it was a wiretap. Who were we wiretapping? Were we tapping an MP, or were we wiretapping the Chinese or consulate or
right,
whatever? Like,
yeah,
and that seems like an important thing to make clear in reporting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
It seems like that's an important thing to make clear, that the source of this is like a wiretap, which wasn't made clear, and then if so, who is being wiretapped. But it was very loose. The reporting didn't have a lot of details. It was, missing a lot of independent verifications. And then it's just one of these things where like you just have a bullshit detector for this. And at some point I kept going, okay, so I have somehow managed in 45 minutes to find about 10 holes in all of these stories. Global does not seem to be doing duty of care from an editorial perspective at all.
Right.
And more importantly, as I wrote in a piece, God, whose title is now, Treason Cybar, Just felt like we were accusing politicians of betraying this country in like a very like it just felt like we were tossing around like very big allegations with like not a lot of actual proof. It just seems like a bad road to go down. Because if you're gonna accuse somebody of treason, like you gotta make sure you. And at no point did I feel like Sam Cooper's reporting ever was sort of solid enough to match the level of accusation he was making, because it wasn't.
What do you think of his departure from Global?
He can be wants about how, he wanted to, launch this independent thing. No, yeah, okay, sure. You probably did. And you probably at some point have, wanted to be your own boss. But here's the thing. You don't take a victory lap and a curtain call at Global and then go to launch this independent thing. You don't leave in the middle of a lawsuit if you have, cracked the code. Because the thing is, when you become that level of journalist, where you have where you, become synonymous with being on a story of huge consequence, when you become, Woodward and Bernstein, and, that sort of synonymous with breaking a certain story or a certain, number of stories around the same topic, you get to write your own check. You get to write your own way forward. The thing is, if you want to be able to continue sort of like independent, if you want to have less strictures on it, like there's a reason why Bob Fife has the sort of independent, why he's the independence within the Globe's sort of hierarchy and structure, that whatever he wants ends up on A1, because, well, it's Bob Bleepin' Fife, and he's right more than he's wrong. Yes, he gets things wrong, but he's right more than he's wrong, and he has taken down many a career for it. And the problem is, Coop wouldn't leave at the height of his powers to run a Substack if he wasn't pushed out the door. And the problem is, Global isn't even defending. Like, their legal argument is not a truth defense, right? They are not running that the allegations printed are true, because truth is an absolute defense against defamation and libel. It's an absolute defense. And that is not their legal defense. Their legal defense is that, it's allegations, and therefore you can't really sue us because we only said they're allegations. Well, okay, cool. You just essentially admitted that what he said doesn't actually meet a rigorous standard upon review. And at this point, the question is just the question becomes a legal finding of fact, but in the same way that we all can look at the OJ trial and say that he definitely killed, but he wasn't convicted. We all know Sam Cooper got it wrong. And now the question becomes, is there a legal way out? But we all know the answer.
So here's the thing, is because we were wondering this on the show, when you get a situation like this and the story is running, and especially because the Globe seemed to be in competition with Global, because they were both pursuing the story, and at one point the Globe and Mail didn't go ahead with one and Global did. When you're getting to that point, and you may have certain journalists rounding certain corners on verification, whatnot, or using the line, well, gee, these allegations are really juicy and they'll get a lot of clicks, so let's report on allegations and hope that little fig leaf of plausible deniability. So, it's like, well, yeah, okay. There's the journalism of taking somebody said that's not true, and then taking a mic and putting in front of the person about whom they said it, and they said, yeah, person A said this about you, how do you react? With absolutely no analysis of what person A said, no verification of whether or not it's true, no search to see whether or not that thing should even be repeated and framed as something that someone should respond to. Because, if somebody says something that's completely bullshit and you know it's completely bullshit, why would you take that thing and said, this person said this bullshit thing, how do you react? It seems to be that your reporting would say, this person said this thing and this thing is bullshit. Here's why. Right? So you have this situation here where he might be finding it advantageous to just report on allegations, and Global will turn around and say, well, we did our due diligence. Our editors and our lawyers did our due diligence. But if you're reporting, if you take the position that, well, I'm only reporting allegations, and it's true these allegations were made, but no analysis of the allegations, like you say, that is loose and dangerous, because what happens is that it leaves tons of gaps, and when you leave tons of gaps, then you have people that are rushing in to fill them in with what they need to be true for whatever narrative they want to spin to stick. I mean, lives were potentially destroyed here.
Yeah, and the thing about that story is the Globe rejected it on the same sourcing that that Global ended up running it on, which is to say, these secondhand reports of what this transcript said without having seen the transcript, and with a straight up PMO denial that that they had seen the transcript until media requests had come to them. Because that's the other thing that was always really bad about Cooper's writing, is that they always tried to find a way to get the PMO to sort of do it, even though the ties were tenuous at best.
Yeah. Right.
The thing is, we just don't have a media culture where other reporters will say out loud what they actually believe about other journalists reporting, because they don't want to speak out of turn, and they don't want to say something that's gauche. The problem with that is that a bunch of people who know that Sam Cooper's story doesn't add up refuse to actually say so on the record, because they don't want to be in a position where they're criticizing what someone else is reporting. But here's the actual fundamental truth, if you want to. Why was Global the news organization that was willing to print all of the more salacious parts of the China interference story? Because the sixth news organization in this country. They are third amongst the TV networks, and then the Globe is sort of more respected than them, and Post Media is more respected than them. And other than Mercedes Stevens occasionally getting a military scoop, Global doesn't break news. They have not proven to be a valuable news organization in a long time. And they saw the opportunity to Star Make, and they said, screw it, we're just going to run it, even though literally within 45 minutes I'm able to destroy every one of these stories. But that's the thing. Like, there's a reason the CBC never reported it. There's a reason Bob Fife didn't report the Two Michaels allegation, because the Globe and Mail has an institutional structure that actually, cares about doing news. And there's a reason the CBC was never able to independently confirm any of this. Like, do we think that they didn't try? Like, unless you are the most diehard, dyed-in-the-wool conservative partisan who thinks that, the CBC is just, up Justin Trudeau, of course the CBC tried to independently verify all of this and couldn't.
Well, of course.
Because trust me.
Of course, because when something that...
If they could have independently verified it, they would have.
Well, yeah, because when something like this comes up, it's like, ooh, blood in the water, and all the whole press corps head just like snaps and goes, let's go find it. And if there's nothing there, there's nothing there. Nothing there.
Right, like that's the thing.
Differing opinion in the chat. So yes,
like if the
go ahead,
government
Evan.
had been actively wrong on this, right, as opposed to potentially not taking it seriously enough from the right at the beginning, but if there were actually like active wrongs here, we were actively colluding with the Chinese, if they were actively tolerating this in some sort of quid pro quo, we'd know about it by now. We'd know. There's enough blood in the water. There were enough leaks out of CSIS. We'd know. And that's, I think, the big thing is that at this point, whatever's out there to be gotten is out there. And the Conservatives have played a complete disaster of it politically, because there was and remains a reasonable complaint about how this government handled this, which is they did not take, anecdotal complaints about specific interference in specific, heavily Chinese areas. They did not take them seriously enough because they viewed it as conservative sour grapes because they lost some seats. That's like a reasonable complaint that the Liberals, that like normal non-Trudeau hate, like psycho Trudeau haters would agree with. We won these seats. You're just complaining. So yeah, we didn't take it as seriously as we should have. Cool. Normal people would understand that argument. It would, could potentially be persuaded to agree with it. The idea that Justin Trudeau is, Xi Jinping's, puppet, and Trudeau is taking orders from China. That's not an argument anybody's going to listen to, and that is why the Conservatives have massively played a bad, played their hand badly on, because they've taken a completely plausible attack line. Looked at that, said, actually, no, we're going to go to the psycho extreme, and we're just gonna actually start arguing a completely deranged thing that no sensible human being could ever in reality.
Yep. That's why I'm wondering if this is going to just disappear into the grass, like you said, because if the Conservatives are hell-bent on not agreeing on a process to move forward, they just want the Prime Minister to say we have a public inquiry, and then they want to bitch about everything about the inquiry. What happens next? Then there's no path forward unless the federal government takes, whatever it does with the Bloc Québécois. This lasts long enough, and it takes whatever consensus they reach with the Bloc Québécois and NDP and runs with that and say, well, Conservatives, stick it. You explain to everyone why it is that all the three other parties are okay with this and you're not. Why are you not rowing in the same direction as the rest of the team? Because otherwise, I don't see how this happens. There's no incentive for the Prime Minister to go forward with it. I mean, if he could just let it die. Now, Mr. Singh will probably not let it die. That might be the only thing. But if Polliver really doesn't want an inquiry because he can't control what comes out, and there's no way that an inquiry is going to be just the last two elections, and it seems that in discussions in the group, they only want the inquiry to not even be about interference, but more about what did Trudeau know or the Liberals know, and when did they know it based on this particular stuff. So they don't even want to look into what China's doing. They want it so narrow so that they can tie something to the PMO. And they certainly don't want us looking back at least the last two governments of two different stripes to see how foreign interference works when it's a conservative government versus it's a liberal government, because I'm sure the tactics and strategies are not exactly the same. Because, I mean, clearly we have if one of the two was more receptive than the other, it would definitely not be the Liberals to getting a little help from China, based on track record. This one, is there a possibility that this just peters out and goes at the end?
Well, the thing is, the Conservatives definitely don't want to talk about the 2019 election for a very specific reason, which is the thing is, in 2019, Scheer had a less China hawkish message. The Liberals took massive damage from in heavily Chinese seats. They lost ground in BC. They didn't win Markham Unionville, which just like a pure sort of education with the swings we saw in all the white suburbs, it absolutely should have fallen that time. And then what happened in 2021 was the Conservatives became way more hawkish on China, and they lost ground with Chinese Canadian voters. Like, and the problem is that the Conservatives like the idea that that was Chinese interference, as opposed to them running a hawkish message on China and Chinese Canadian voters going, actually, this doesn't sound like legitimate criticism. This sounds like vaguely race baiting. So we're going to vote against you. And the Conservatives don't really want to have to face the prospect that actually it's more comforting for them if they get to say that they lost Richmond and Markham Unionville, and they lost ground in target seats with Chinese populations. It's easier for them to tell themselves that they lost it because China was interfering in WeChat, through WeChat and various other things. But the thing is that it might just be straight up cope. Like, it might just be straight up that they lost because they adopted a more hawkish policy on China. And they don't want to admit that, because that means that actually there isn't a grand conspiracy here. It's just that campaigns have consequences and messaging has consequences. Right. And their China hawkishness didn't win them any votes, or didn't win them enough votes in like working class areas that, that they were trying to, and it lost them seats. It lost them Chinese votes. So the policy was just a disaster from a political perspective. That's the other reason I don't want an inquiry, because it might just point out that Aaron O'Toole's bad at politics.
Well, yeah. Well, it's another. It's almost like a variation on the theme of the typical conservative line when they lose an election. It's like, Canadians liked our policies, but we had trouble communicating them. No, your problem is the policies and the people delivering them. Your policy sucks, and you're a bunch of dicks. If only people understood our policies better. No, if people understood your policies better, you'd get fewer votes. That's why you lie about everything in your policies. You don't want us to know what they actually are, because if we knew, we would never vote for them. It's like, we lost because of China interference. We lost because Trudeau didn't stand up. We lost. It's like, no, again, it's your policies. It's your strategic choices. They sucked. It's like, you don't win elections by, I mean, I guess you can, but you don't win elections by like picking your group of the day and then demonizing them and doing that constantly for 2 years and then wondering, gee, why didn't people vote for us?
Well, there's something here that
the absolute wildest thing. Oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
we're having a bit of a delay here, so I apologize. I don't know what's going on. The thing that nobody in the press seems to, or mainstream media, if you will, never seems to address, and we've pointed it out, and I'll continue to do so. Why do they never, the Conservatives never say the word China? Never. It's always Beijing interference, not China. Is that because of the FIPA deal? Like, I'm sincerely asking the question, and nobody's been able to answer it. They do not ever accuse a country of interfering in an election. They accuse a city within that country. Now, I get Beijing is where everything is run out of. It's like Ottawa, but if Canada was interfering in somebody's election, would they say Ottawa interference or Canadian interference? It just
because the Chinese community in Canada doesn't like China and the CCP being conflated, and so they say it's Beijing interference because that implies men in rooms making decisions, as opposed to trying to conflate the whole country. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things that, like, someone in some meeting room was like, actually, no one can call us racist if we say it's Beijing interference and not. And it's like, no one actually hears the distinction they're going for. Mm-hmm. But that's 1,000% what it is, because they're trying to convey. It's the same reason, like, It's the same reason, people will talk about like Ottawa bureaucrats. It's like, well, there's nothing inherent to Ottawa about the bureaucracy, or nothing inherent about Ottawa being relevant to most attacks, but Ottawa bureaucrats has a meaning. It speaks a language to a certain kind of person. It's the same thing here. It's an attempt to convey, 25 senior advisors huddled in a room somewhere in some state room, not a country, because they do understand that if they make this too much about China, like there's still more room they could lose with Chinese voters.
Right. Okay. I want.
Thank you for that.
So, thanks. We are since we had the Alberta election, we had by-elections happen as well. Now, the first thing I want to read that you wrote, I just want to read it because it's so well written. It's the stuff you wrote about Jenny Byrne. I just want to read it into the record just for fun. So if you just want to sit back and enjoy this. The last time we saw federal conservative leadership in this country, influenced and advised by Jenny Byrne, we saw one of the worst run campaigns in modern Canadian history. The 2015 Tory campaign, remember that long campaign was a Tory tactical choice, thank you, had little to fill the void of an 11-week campaign. And the one thing they did announce in that campaign was the horrifically offensive barbaric cultural practices hotline, which killed the Tories and ethnic communities and was one of, if not the worst single policy announcement in recent history. The Byrne campaign of 2015 was lifeless, it was useless, and it felt at times like a campaign more about saving the furniture than actually winning. They went into that campaign clearly expecting the Liberals to shit the bed, and when that didn't happen, they didn't have a pivot. Again, the same strategy as the NDP in Alberta just recently. They couldn't find a message to knock the Liberals off with, and the most memorable thing Harper said or did during that campaign was compliment Trudeau in the Munk debate for ably defending the Harper government's anti-terror law. Now Byrne is back after spending 2021 backseat driving the O'Toole campaign from the cheap seats on the podcast that shall not be named, as a firm member of Bolivar's inner circle, and now she's failed in 3 by-elections. The Tories had a swing against them in Mississauga Lakeshore, they came away with a pathetic performance in Oxford, and they're going backwards in Winnipeg South Centre. And at some point I'm wondering, are we that surprised that the architect of the 2015's failures is failing again? If you care to say anything about that, I'd be more than happy to hear it, and also wondering why you refer to it as the podcast that shall not be named.
So I'll dispense with the second half of that question first. It's because David Hurley, I appear to live rent-free in David Hurley's mind, which is quite fun.
Okay.
And the thing is, Gerald Butts is one of my bigger backers and has been responsible for a lot of the notoriety I've gained since the last time I was on the podcast. And the problem is that I'm aware of the fact that at any time Jerry Butts might tweet out one of my columns, and every time he does, and sometimes even when he doesn't, I then get David Hurley either tweeting at me or commenting on my shit. And I think David Hurley might search his own name, and therefore I don't really want to do anything that like brings him back into my orbit, because the thing is, David Hurley's a fucking idiot, and he has run really bad Liberal campaigns many times, and he has lost the Liberal Party many times, and I hate him with passion because he's an idiot. And so I would just like to not piss off David Hurley, I would just like to not have him engage with my work as much as humanly possible. I mean, on Jenny Byrne, she's never actually proven the sort of like a genius tactician reputation that she has. And I mostly think that political staff decisions do not matter nearly as much as like most people. The counterpoint to that, though, is that she is not good at this. Like, the 2015 campaign was a disgrace from Harper, and I don't even just mean a moral disgrace. It was a tactical disgrace. You do an 11-week campaign to then do nothing with it. You do nothing with the fact it's an 11-week campaign. You do nothing in terms of making an argument. You had based your entire attack line on Trudeau with the he's not ready yet. and then
I think they just thought if they gave him enough time to show it, he would fail.
Right. And then, but the thing you have to remember, right, is that the McLean's debate in the 2015 campaign was like mid-August, early to mid-August. Election day was October 19th. There were 2 months between Trudeau coming a really remarkably solid, like, not just my opinion, it was consensus opinion at the time. Oh, Trudeau, way more impressive than I thought. Mulcair, what a bad performance. 2 months. They couldn't pivot. They couldn't pivot off of a message for 2 months and kept running the, bad hair. What are you doing? And it's just like, so you just have no ability to pivot if you're wrong. Not a good campaign. Right. That's not a good strategy. And the problem if you're a conservative and the godsend if you're a liberal right now is that I don't think Jenny Byrne is going to be able to look at these results and go, okay, well, we need to change things because these by-elections are horrific. And the thing is, we know what a government that's about to get destroyed. We know what the by-election results look like. We've seen it. We saw it with Patrick Brown in 2014 before he ended up getting wiped out and Doug Ford won. But like we saw those by-elections. We've seen federally what that looks like in the Harper majority. Like we know what by-election results and polling that says an incumbent government is dead in the water looks like. It's not the Liberals gain. It's not the Liberal vote share is up on average. It's certainly not the opposition vote share is stuck in neutral. And the thing is, every smart conservative knows it, which is why there wasn't even really a push to be like, actually, these by-election results were good for the conservatives, right? It was mostly just, by-election results don't matter. Well, that's fine. You can make that argument. The math doesn't agree with you, but whatever. The historical record certainly doesn't back you on this. I know because I've done all the historical research. But the thing is, the conservatives are stuck because clearly some number of people who voted for Trudeau last time are willing to say, I'll vote for Poilievre. But the lived experience of people actually having to use ballot box suggests that they are not actually as willing to do that as they say. And if they're not willing to vote for Pierre Poilievre after the year and a half that we've had since the last Canadian election of, rising inflation, of mortgage rate hikes, of mostly liberal ineptitude from a comms perspective, and just complete and utter nightmares for the last 4 months now in terms of the Liberals being able to get on and stay on message. If Pierre Poilievre can't do better than going backwards in Winnipeg South Center or Mississauga, then what are we doing here? And why are we still pretending like this stupid? Why are we pretending that he's suddenly gonna win an election when he can't do this now at midterm when it's a free swing against the government?
Yep. As you say in your article here, the Tories' whole strategy right now should be in tatters because either this government is as unpopular as everyone says it is and the Tories still can't fucking do anything against them, or the government isn't nearly as unpopular as everyone thinks, which suggests that the opposition might be failing to make them unpopular. I heavily suspect it's the former, mostly because since about 2017, that's been this country's relationship with the Liberals. They're kind of shit, but they're still the best option. That's not a good thing, but it's true. And the Tories have to do what the Poilievre leadership hasn't been able to do, and that's find new fucking pitch, because this ain't working. And the best way to do that? Get rid of Byrne. Find someone who actually has recent experience running a winning campaign and stop pretending that someone whose last substantive contribution to public life in this country was the disaster class that was 2015 was ever going to put Poilievre into office. Strategically, I agree with you. As a Canadian, I hope they don't clue in and take your advice.
I think we can feel pretty confident that that my Substack is not going to be running, strategy for the opposition leader.
We're not going to take any advice from some
because
commie Evan Scrimshaw.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I feel pretty confident that she is going to be heavily involved, which is why I'm perfectly fine taking my swing now. I mean, the thing is that Polyev just this is a campaign that in any other time in any other country I would look at and go, oh, so you're just dead. But because it's Canada and because, like, I can see his writing from my house, I'm sort of like forced into this rhetorical position where I have to take his threat seriously. And I'm like, the best he can do is like a 5-point lead on average in a situation where that popular vote lead doesn't really matter. But the best he can do is like a 4-point swing from the previous election at midterm with a bad economy.
Yeah.
Like, okay. Like I look at it all the time, right? UK Labour's got a 20-point lead today. Election. I know what a swing that is going to take out a government looks like. I know what polling at midterm for a government that's truly in the depths of despair looks like. I see it all the goddamn time in Australia, in the UK. We see it in the US sometimes, right? We know what this looks like. These polls are not it. These polls are a government that is tracking to be comfortably reelected when the rubber meets the road, because, as I pointed out about 4,000 times, Tim Hudak had a lead in every single poll conducted for 10 months from like halfway through 2010 to about halfway through 2011. He led every single poll for about 10 months because that was a government, the McGuinty government, that was a government that was actually under serious threat.
Mm-hmm.
And that, even then, with all of the baggage of Dalton, the Liberals came one seat away from majority government.
Yeah.
Incumbent governments do better almost uniformly do better at an election than they do halfway through a term. It's one of the great rules of politics. It's why the Alberta NDP were never in as strong of a position as their polls pretended they were. It's why the Manitoba PCs have a decent chance of winning this fall, because, spoiler alert, that election's coming up, and look at that, the government's recovering in the polls. We'll see if it's going to be enough, but as of right now, trend line's looking good for the incumbents. And a lot of the people who made the case for Danielle Smith because she has time and she'll be able to recover this, a lot of those people and a lot of the people who are going to make cases against the Manitoba make the case against the Manitoba NDP when Canadian elections Twitter starts to care about that over the summer and fall. A lot of those people are also the same people who are going to look us dead in the eye on online and say that Justin Trudeau will never be will only go down from here. No, he won't. He's not going to get Kathleen Wind, partially because Andrea Horvath, for whatever her failings, was at least competent. And Jagmeet isn't, but he's not getting Kathleen. And if he's not getting Kathleen, then he's just going to recover as voters get to the polls. And the thing that no one wants to acknowledge, because it's kind of ephemeral and there's nothing you can really do with it once you do acknowledge it, is Quebec is volatile. It's always volatile. It's historically volatile, and the Liberals are a good run of form in Quebec at the right time away from majority government.
Mm-hmm.
But the chances of a Liberal majority by getting a Quebec surge are better than the chances that Pierre Poilievre becomes prime minister.
Right.
But there are about 4,000 columns about Prime Minister Poilievre written, and absolutely no one has written actually Trudeau might win, and straight up he might win a majority again.
Right.
Takes. Because for some reason, the media have decided they know the answer, despite the fact that the math for Poilievre being prime minister never made any sense.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I feel it's the same situation as in I think 2015, where you're talking about Mulcair, where everybody was saying, yeah, he actually has a chance because he had done a good job on the opposition benches, being, basically the prosecutor in chief. But I mean, I was writing at the time that because he had said yes to the Sherbrooke Declaration, which would have never sold anywhere outside Quebec, and was saying was really promoting the daycare stuff as well, which wouldn't have got him any additional benefit in Quebec because they already had their program. And I'm sitting there, as like, you have a policy that won't fly in Quebec, and you have another policy that won't fly in the rest of Canada before you even leave the starting gate. You can't win this election. You possibly can't. Yes, and then he made the mistake in the debate where, as a lawyer, you're never supposed to ask a question that you don't know, you already don't know the answer to, and
Right.
then asked Trudeau for what his number was for Quebec separation, because he thought he was going to score a point in Quebec and secure it with the Sherbrooke Declaration thing. And then Trudeau turned around and said nine Justice of Supreme Court that's talked about the Clarity Act, and there went Mulcair's glass jaw. It's sometimes, if you're looking at the policies, the thing about the Conservatives that I find is that consistency, coherence, and clarity over time are not their strong points. If they take every subject individually, they win the nanosecond, or they try to win the subject. But then when you take what they say on one subject and take on another and put it together, it's not a coherent, consistent policy. Both things can't be true at the same time, or they can't work. It seems like a party that, by its policy decisions and its statements, are already sowing the seeds for its eventual failure in the next election. I mean, he already said that he's going to take away dental care. He said that he wasn't really going to support childcare, even though he just voted for it in the last. He just seems to be all over the place. He's talking about food, and we need to cut the carbon tax in order to help you with food, but cutting the carbon tax isn't going to help you when there's frost in Florida and the oranges go down, or there's a parasitic infection in lettuce and that happens, or there's avian flu and then the price of eggs go up. There are no solutions.
Well, let's also not rule out the fact that if they build that wall that so many MAGA people want, that means that the people who actually work on the farms and pick the fruits and vegetables to get them to market won't be available. They rely upon that. The United States economy relies upon illegals, for want of a better term, to run the backbone of their labor industry. So if suddenly these people are no longer available because they won't let any of them in, which let's not get into the weeds on that one, but that will also drive up the cost of food, because you're going to have to suddenly start hiring natural-born Americans, if you will, to pick the fruits and vegetables, and nobody wants to do that, because that's, as far as many Americans are concerned, that's work for other people. I'm trying to choose my words carefully here, but you just understand the picture I'm painting. That will also drive up the cost of food, because they're going to have to pay people a livable wage to do that work. Because right now they have illegals doing it, and they pay them next to nothing. And yet that's more money than they would get if they were in their home country. So there's so many mitigating circumstances here that drive up the cost of food that nobody ever wants to talk about.
Well, there's not only that, there's the fact also that they're playing various communities against each other, because we have people coming from the Caribbean, we have got people coming from Mexico, and the people that are employing these people, because the rules are not all that great or not really in the interests of the people that are coming, basically saying, hey, you don't look like you want to work very enough. How about we call in the Mexicans and bring them over? They like to work, and for less.
Yeah.
Right. So that also is driving the prices down. So you eliminate all of that, and
this comment from Tavi G. They're going to solve that with anti-abortion, less education, and decrease in child labor laws. Yeah. I mean, that's not far
Ontario,
off.
Doug's Ford's Ontario, there's certain courses you no longer have to take in grade 12 or grade 13 if you're going to go, like, why wouldn't you still teach these people these things
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and still promote trades? Now, you don't need to know this anymore.
It's not important. You can go right into the trades as a 16-year-old because we can pay you less.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's also very, very. We're getting back to feudalism here, is what it looks like to me. But I'm not a historian, so please correct me if I'm wrong. I probably am. I'm wrong constantly on a lot of things, and I'm happy to admit when I'm wrong. But it just looks like feudal overlords are going to be running our world from here on out. That or AI chatbots or something. It's all so twisted and evil. Yeah. And speaking of twisted and evil, did you like the way I did that? That wasn't too bad. This is the do we call it the elephant in the room? I don't know what to call this. It's just that, well, I'm going to put this graphic on the screen and let's have a chat about it, shall we? Because we haven't addressed this yet, and it was something I wanted to address this morning. And that's this. Viktor Orban with Stephen Harper. And Viktor Orban's comment, had a great meeting today with IDU Alliance Chairman Stephen Harper. International cooperation between right-wing conservative parties is more important than ever. Chairman Harper is a great ally in this respect. Thank you for your support, Mr. Chairman. Viktor Orban is a fucking Nazi.
And he's speaking of Harper like he's Chairman Z.
Yeah. Like, I've not seen anything. I've seen stuff on Twitter. I've not seen anything in mainstream media to address that photo yesterday. And funny enough, if you were not on Twitter, you probably didn't know that took place. And I say that because I had a beer last night with a buddy of mine who is a very well-versed individual when it comes to the political sphere in this country. And we were talking about how, Harper this and Trudeau that and la, 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 la. He says, I think historically in the future, we may find that Harper did a lot of good things in the future. I go, you're looking at ways like Brian Mulroney is kind of looked at. And, well, he did some good stuff and, history will smile upon him. I'm like, yeah, they're not going to smile on Harper. He goes, well, what do you mean? What? And I said, oh, you haven't heard or seen? And I pulled it up and showed it to him, and he just sat there and went, yeah, so let's throw my theory about history smiling on him out the window, because holy shit, he's shaking hands with a Nazi and partnering up with him. And it's like they're so emboldened now that they're doing it in front of us, and they don't fucking care.
That's the thing that's like actually terrifying about the right these days, is that they do not seem to have any sort of backbone or principle on the idea that there are certain kinds of quote unquote conservative parties that they should not deal with, right? And like there was some talk about how, like Andrew Scheer as conservative leader, should be denouncing Donald Trump on a weekly basis. And like, yeah, that would have been a sop to my soul, but like, that's not a reasonable expectation. But the problem for the conservatives is Stephen Harper is the last conservative prime minister. There have been 3 conservative prime ministers in the last 60 years in Canada. One of them realistically is not a conservative anymore. I don't know when the last time Joe Clark would have voted for a conservative party. It's probably been a while. And the problem is, one guy isn't really a conservative anymore. One of them took brown paper envelopes full of cash, and the third is now palling around with pseudo dictators and certainly fascist authoritarians. So it's just a great legacy of this party. Is it's just a great situation the conservatives find themselves in, because this is entirely indefensible, and it's entirely a situation where, like, to the extent that anybody cares, to the extent that there is any sort of, legacy or impact of this, it's just going to be to make the conservatives seem crazy again. And the whole point of the Harper legacy domestically was supposed to be getting the Conservatives to no longer be seen to be crazy. And apparently in his post-political career, he has decided to make his basic premise as a politician substantially harder. I guess because being chairman of the IDU, it must pay really damn well to be actively lighting his only meaningful political legacy in this country on fire. Because this ain't the first time he's met with Viktor Orban. It's not the second time he's met with Viktor Orban. And the thing is, at some point, I have to try and understand what the Conservatives are doing, because this guy is bad news. It's horrific morally and everything. It's also completely insane from a strategic perspective, because if you're Polyev, you're trying to get away from the campaign you just had to run in Portage Lisgar, and you're trying not to let the sort of, let's be honest, your homophobic campaign, the flyer where Max Bernier marching in a pride parade was prominently, used. If you're trying to pivot back off of that to a general election message, how does reminding people that, your conservative party is friendly with a whole bunch of fucking psycho conservative parties across the world, how is that a good thing for you?
Yeah.
I want to address a comment here, if I could, gentlemen. There's James had a comment that I will put on the screen here, and I know what you're saying, James. I don't think you should call that dude a Nazi, a racist, a homophobe, etc. All true, but Nazi labels actually stall critiques against the intended target, except for this. This is why I call him a Nazi, because, well, long-standing advisor to Viktor Orban resigns over pure Nazi speech. The Hungarian Prime Minister's remarks on race mixing was indefensible. And I'll put the link to that in the chat. It's from The Guardian. And that's why I wanted to address that comment, because I'm not going to label somebody a Nazi easily. If it walks like a Nazi and talks like a Nazi and thinks like a Nazi, it's a Nazi, and I'm going to say so. And quite frankly, Orban is a Nazi. Period.
Now we have another comment. Harper knows that if you asked 100 Canadians next week what their thoughts were, R.E. Harper meeting with that fascist, 98% would shrug, but 98% would shrug because they didn't know it happened, or they don't really know who Orban is, because our media
mainstream media is not covering
doesn't
it.
do the media doesn't do the civics piece or the context piece. Here's the other thing that I find interesting, Evan, what you say about the strategy not working, because at the same time as you have images like this going on, you have images like this going on. The story on the other side. So you got Harper shaking hands with Orban like this, but you got Trudeau like this in a warm embrace with President Zelensky, who seems to have all day for his visits and his calls. How do you be the guy? I mean, Orban right now, along with Erdogan, are blocking Sweden's ascension to NATO. They have Jens Stoltenberg basically, he basically got a little pissed off yesterday. Sort of almost like put his foot down, saying that, we got to do this and we got to do this now. Now is the time for Sweden to join the alliance. We all agreed that the full membership of Sweden is in the security interest of all allies, and we all want to complete this process as soon as possible. So you got the former prime minister shaking hands with the guy that's blocking that from happening, and we have the current prime minister who seems to be on the side of you don't march into another country and just say this land is mine. It's kind of a basic.
The thing about
how do you win that contest?
You don't, because the Conservatives have also backed themselves into a massive corner with the whole, like, Canada's a joke, right. Trudeau has made us weak. And it's like, it's incredible. Like, it's incredibly stupid. It's been incredibly stupid. For some reason, they continue to sort of triple down on this, because the thing is, they can't see Trudeau as anything other than a joke, and so they're
But it hasn't been
like,
working
they're
for
still
them.
stuck in this idea. Okay, but here's the thing: these are the same people who thought electing Pierre Poilievre leader was a good possibility. So clearly, these guys don't have like brilliant strategic brains here, right? Like, we can just be honest in saying that. Like, clearly there's not a strategic genius to the Conservative Party these days.
No.
But the fundamental truth of the matter is very, very simple. Justin Trudeau is not nearly as hated in this country or outside of this country as Conservatives pretend and want to make it seem.
Mm-hmm.
And the Biden speech when he was up in, I think it was January. No, it was like March. No, I'm blank. Wow, that sense of time is not a good thing for me these days. But like, the Biden speech was a love letter, not just to Canada, but to Justin Trudeau. It was a complete vindication of Trudeau's diplomacy efforts. And the thing is, the single greatest sort of foreign policy moment of the Trudeau legacy was, of course, the famous candid camera moment where him, Boris Johnson, Emmanuel Macron, and I want to say it was Angela Merkel is the fourth person in that list, but it could be somebody else because I haven't seen it in a few years. Was the candid camera moment when they were talking about the Trump press conference and why they were running late from some European, NATO, G7 summit, whatever. And Trudeau and Boris and all of them are just talking, and you sort of like hear them calling out like Trump a little bit, because when you just see the conversation, right? When you just see the faces, Trudeau is not some, is not some kid that the rest of the world leaders don't respect.
No. He's in the center of that conversation, actually.
Right. Because the thing is, Canada is a very specific part of the global ecosystem, right? Which is to say, we are the connective tissue between the Brits, the Americans, and the rest of the world, right? We are the country that understands both of those countries, which means that we have a value to both of those, to anybody who deals with one or both of those countries, right? The Canadians have better diplomatic relations than the French or the Germans or the Italians do with the British, which means that if you're trying to get information about what the Brits are thinking, you probably come to us.
Yeah.
And certainly we have the best sense of what the Americans are doing because we, live on the same continent, and we, more importantly, we understand better than the Europeans when Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Barack Obama is posturing in public or when he's actually articulating a belief. And at the end of the day, we have an important role. We are the connective tissue. We help out. We're, an important country. We're not the most important country. We're fine. We are what we are. And frankly, in a world where Britain and France are, let's be honest here, declining powers, they are in arguably terminal decline, both of those countries. Canada's importance is just going to go up because, like, let's be honest here. Does anybody think that Britain in 10 years is going to look in any way competent, stable? Of course not. On the outside of the European Union, they're just going to look like idiots. At some point, France is going to vote for a Le Pen, be it Marine or the niece, I think, who's going to be the eventual replacement. Like, at some point, the far right's going to win in France, mostly because Macron's, good job by you. You held the center twice. I don't think the center is going to hold forever in France. And at that point, Canada just being this, to quote Stephen Harper, to be this island of stability in a sea of chaos. Trudeau looks pretty stable otherwise, right? When we got all these things about how, the rest of the world must look at Canada so terribly. Who's this rest of the world that we're supposed to be like failing here, right?
Right.
Who's this rest of the world that is supposedly on top of their shit, right? The UK is a joke and a half. France is burning every other week. The Germans have a supposedly environmentalist political party that has eschewed nuclear for coal. The Americans nearly set their economy on fire.
Italy's run by
last month.
fascists.
Just because they got away with it doesn't mean they get they actually get away with it. Japan had a guy assassinate a former prime minister, and somehow the political party of the former prime minister is now still racked with turmoil. Who is this other? Italy's run by a fascist. Who are these other countries that are supposedly like competent and on top of their stuff?
Yep. It's almost like, it's funny you're saying that, because it's almost parallel to when during COVID, when they were saying the students are falling behind. Falling behind who? Students all over the world.
The whole planet was shut down.
It's like falling behind where they should probably be if everything was in normal times, but we're not in normal times and nobody is. So why are you panicking?
Measured against who? Right? It's like sometimes I'll hear something on the news and I'm like, who the fuck wrote that? And I'm just going to go back to this one because it just makes me think of it. Like, they're falling behind. Who? It was, what was it? Lloyd Robertson comes on the evening news and he's like, according to the census from the updated census from 5 years ago, we're growing older as a nation. Well, it's been 5 years. What?
Yeah.
What did you expect?
And Evan, just so the lady in the group was Princess Anne, and also Mark Rutte, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, was in the group as well.
Thank you.
When they were talking, but
it's just laughable. Like the thing about Trudeau is that there are so many legitimate ways to attack him.
Right.
Yes.
He is I every time I talk to an American who like has a vague understanding of American politics and reads like 10% of my Canadian politics columns, they just go, "Why do you hate Trudeau again?" And I'm like, I like the policy agenda. I hate the lack of ethics. If we could get the economic redistribution without the sort of like Laurentian elite, sort of we can do no wrong, my shit doesn't stink, sort of cavalierness on ethics, the Liberal Party would never lose an election. But the problem is the Liberal Party went from third place to first place, and within 9 months, Liberal staffers on the Hill were talking about natural governing party bullshit again.
Yeah.
Because these people are ingrained in the idea that liberal governments are the norm and anything else is the exception. And like historically it's true, but you don't want your staffers fucking acting like it. But the problem is, the reason conservatives always lose in this country is because liberal governments give lots of targets, right? They give lots of normal, reasonable targets for you to attack. And most of the time, conservatives attack for dumb shit. They attack for,
$6,000 hotel rooms
instead of for basic costs of what being a country is, or well, you spent too much in COVID. Okay, so what would you not have spent money on? You spent too much money on COVID. Okay, so does that mean that you wouldn't have done the CERP? Well, no. But you spent too much money. Okay, so would you like to actually articulate a criticism, or do you just want to sound like an idiot? Well, no, they don't, because if they articulate a criticism, then they open themselves up to criticism on the other side. So what do we do then? And the answer becomes you do nothing, and you just hope to God that at some point the Liberals fall on their ass sufficiently and at the right time in the electoral cycle that you win by accident, essentially. And it'll happen at some point. The Liberals will not govern this country forever.
Right.
But I don't know if SNC and Blackface couldn't beat Justin Trudeau in 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Am I really supposed to believe that Pierre Poilievre is suddenly going to get lucky with, a late, election year with 2 election year scandals worse than that?
Mm-hmm. And especially he's not
I
going
don't
to get,
think so.
and he's certainly not going to get lucky with the government spent too much to keep you whole and alive.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Oh, and by the way, the other thing that like no one actually can articulate because for some reason no one can have a brain about this. Justin Trudeau is going to get to run in a better economy in a year and a half or 2 years or whatever this
Yep.
election is, than we have right now.
Yep.
And properly understood, a lot of the doubt, like if you believe that the reason the Liberals have lost ground since the last election is a bad economy, right? And then you use your brain and you project that the economy will be better on election day than it is now, then you should think that Poilievre is going to fall back as the economy gets better.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the problem, of course, is that the Conservatives have built a message entirely built around the idea that the economy is going to be bad when the election happens.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not bad when the election happens, if we survive, like if interest rates are flat to potentially even like slightly falling, if we get through this with, most mortgage holders, there's sort of stress, but the market does not tip over. We do not have, a spike in mortgages in arrears. If the soft landing, which is the thing that, which is, the buzzword that everyone's been using, if the soft landing holds, then what's Poilievre's message in 2025? Because the thing is that he has boxed himself into a message that I don't think survives for contact with the electorate, which is that everything's shit, vote for me. Well, what happens if you ran on everything's shit, vote for me, and then everything's not shit by election day?
Right. Yeah. And if you've been spending the last year and a half saying everything's shit and then all of a sudden something's not, and you haven't presented anything else in the window as an alternative to which you can pivot, you can't just break it out now. At that point, it'll be too late.
Yeah. And then, of course, the other thing is, what is he going to do on dental? Right. He has sort of half attempted the pivot on childcare, and I assume that means he is going to do the full pivot on childcare, and he is going to say that he will keep the deals in place.
And then all of a sudden he'll be accused of having Erin O'Toole disease. His own party.
Well, yes, but Bernier might have taken enough damage by losing Portage as badly as he did, so we'll see. But what's he going to do on dental? Because the point I made at the time when the dental agreement was made and Poilievre refused to back it in any meaningful way, dental care is the rare government support that is essentially a transfer from the cities out, right? Because most people who work in cities are going to work in jobs where they have dental coverage, right? Public servants have dental, teachers have dental, nurses have dental, doctors, etc. And then, of course, your white collar professions, right? Your lawyers, your bankers, your accountants, the people who work at Deloitte or KPMG, or take your pick of the Toronto law firms or the Ottawa lobbying shops. They all have dental and vision coverage, right? It's a wealth transfer from the cities to the regions. It's a wealth transfer from Scarborough to Sault Ste. Marie. And the thing is, if Pierre Poilievre wants to become prime minister, he needs to win Sault Ste. Marie, and he needs to win Skeena, and he needs to win Powell River, and he needs to win unfuck random rural Nova Scotia seat, and he needs to win Cape Breton, and he needs to win Labrador. And the thing is, the people who don't have dental are going to be disproportionately, I don't want to say casual workers because that sort of implies, but people who are self-employed, people who do contract gigs,
Yep.
people who do manual labor, farmers, fishermen, sort of, you know, and those are all very important jobs. Like, I'm not,
Yeah.
and you can make a lot of money doing them,
Yeah.
but the fact that, you know, lobster fishermen in Nova Scotia, like, that tends to be that doesn't tend to be a job where you're working for a multinational corporation.
Yep.
And that, therefore, it's a job where, you know, you're not necessarily, you don't have a company who's pooling everyone's dental together, and so it's, you know, fairly cheap for them. No.
Yep.
And the thing is, these are the workers that Poilievre needs to flip from the NDP to the Conservatives.
Yep.
In these orange blue districts. And the dental, and the thing is, if you're going to try and do your economic populism, if you're going to try and flip these, like, economically left-wing, socially conservative, you know, I don't feel very comfortable when I see gay people, you know, kiss in public, but I'm a union member and I support, you know, a social safety net. The thing about pulling off that trick is you need to do the economically left-wing things to flip these voters.
Right.
Poilievre seems to be committing to a policy that will not do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, how am I smarter? How am I more understanding of the voters that Poilievre is trying to win, and how best he can execute his explicit strategy than the people who are actually working for Pierre Poilievre? The dental should be the easiest choice Pierre Poilievre ever has to make, right?
Agreed.
Right. Especially when the cutoff is at
because this should be his standing up for.
Sorry,
because it should be that he is standing up for these people who you know, that you know, that you know, the Laurentian elite never have to see, never have to deal with, right? He can work it into all of his favorite messaging, right? That this is a policy that will enable people who want to get, you know, who do a hard day's of work and all of it, and you can tie it into all of the things that you know, were going off on earlier, all the dumbest things from a Canadian politician ever. And for some reason, he's looking this gift horse in the mouth and saying, I don't want it.
Yeah. And especially when you consider that the cutoff is $90,000, that includes a lot of people.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people. Yeah.
It's malpractice.
It's not malpractice. Yeah, I agree. I wanted to ask you about, this is the subject based on your columns, in which we seem to be on the most violent agreement, is the impending shuffle from the Liberal Party. I'm going to read a couple of things from your article, because I mean, this one is really, really, really good. Kits, I highly suggest it. It's called Schrodinger's Cabinet Shuffle, and I will include a link when I have an opportunity here. But you mention in it that you would really like to see Jean-Yves Duclos go to immigration. I think he's a very good performing minister, and I think he would do very well there. And then you also say, we all know Marco is moving, and I beg to God, out entirely, which again, I agree with you, and I don't think it's going to happen, because he's such a good party person and such a fundraiser that I feel that, you know, he's going to be given another department to mess up, but he needs to be completely out. Just focus on the fundraising, dude.
Agreed.
Just focus on what you're good at. And you mentioned that we probably need a new housing minister, which is again something, if you're going to do a shuffle this time around with, you know, Pierre Poilievre going all over the place and talking all about houses and all that kind of stuff, then yeah, you probably would need to put a housing minister in your next shuffle. That would be really, really smart. So, and maybe Carla Qualtrough. She's one of the better delivery focused ministers, and the disability benefit is now law, so she could move on to another portfolio. I'm with violent agreement with you again that she is a better delivery focused minister. Then you say one is there could be two types of shuffles, and I'm not going to read this one because I'd like you to speak to it, not like this, but you mentioned that there could be a limited shuffle or a larger shuffle, and I wanted you to talk about them, like what you see both of them being and why you think one might be better than another.
So the thing about cabinet shuffles is they're the rare time where the government gets to signal how much trouble they think they're in.
Mm-hmm.
Because generally speaking, the bigger the shuffle, because cabinet shuffles show government's intent. I remember David Cameron's 2014 cabinet shuffle, 9 months before the 2015 UK election, was he bumped a bunch of bumped a bunch of old white men out of cabinet. He he promoted a lot of women, and it was a signal of intent that he needed. It showed what he thought his weakness was, and it was essentially suburban women. Spoiler alert, he won a majority government through fixing that problem. Shuffles tell us what governments think their problems are. And if the government believes some of the more sort of catastrophic polls, the solution would be a big shuffle, not just probably, move one of the big five, right? So Freeland, Jolie, Anita Anand, Stephen Guilbeault, or David Lametti. Like, it's got to be a big move. It's got to be like a fundamental change, like half of the cabinets and new gigs, like a big, big change. Or the other one is, a more limited shuffle. It's a more surgical shuffle, right? You move Marco either out or you demote him, and then you essentially just shuffle a bunch of like the mid-tier cabinet jobs together, right? Seamus O'Regan, Sean Fraser, Jean-Yves Duclos. You just kind of, it's a bunch of lateral moves, but you keep Anand and Freeland and Jolie in their jobs. It's all pretty sane. I think this government thinks they just need a more surgical shuffle. I don't get the sense from either the liberals who I talk to or from the public reporting that they think they're in a sort of like desperation position. And if you don't think you're in a desperate position, then you're fine with a surgical shuffle. Carla Quattro might move because she's, I don't want to say done with the file, but like the thing that she was brought in to do can be moved now. I don't think they're going to move any of the big five just because Guilbeault wants environment, and Quebec, having a Quebecer environment really helps in Quebec.
Yeah, and the thing is with him, I think that, given that he's already punching bag and nobody really on the conservative side likes him, what's the point of putting another person out? He's got the credibility with the people who matter, and there's no point in creating another Catherine McKenna.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Like, I like Jonathan Wilkinson. I don't see why he would take environment again.
Same here.
And then what are you going to do? You're just going to put, like, what? I'm not going to put, I wouldn't put Seamus there. I wouldn't put Mark Miller there. I wouldn't put Sean Fraser there. So you might as well just keep Guilbeault. Right. He's not a bad performer, and he does what he's supposed to do. He does what's on the tin, as it were.
Yeah.
And then like Anand needs to actually like, do the military reform stuff, and also continuity at DPM, DPM and finance, foreign affairs and defense in a war is probably a good idea. And also for all the people who are talking about like, oh, maybe Freeland won't do it. There's no, once you're finance minister in DPM, like there's no demotion, right? There's no acceptable demotion. There's no gig you could give her that isn't obviously a demotion, and there's no reason.
Not even foreign affairs.
As minister. Sorry, what did you say?
Not even foreign affairs.
She's had foreign affairs. Like,
yeah, I guess technically
you wouldn't, and you wouldn't move foreign. And you can. The thing is, you can't really have a DPM who's foreign affairs because then, she's not there for a lot of the time, right? Like, so that's the problem. And the other thing is, again, Melanie Jolie, the Ukrainians seem to really like her, so it doesn't really make sense to move her at this point. And like,
and she's really good.
I want Duclos in immigration. I've made that pitch to every liberal who listens to me. But like, just move a couple of better delivery focused ministers to immigration and housing. clear out a bit of the deadwood. I don't really have a strong opinion on like Pablo Rodriguez, but like maybe a new heritage minister if if you think that might be able to sort of reset, sort of might sort of bring cooler heads on C18. But like beyond that, I don't think this government's in that much trouble. And if you don't, and I don't think the government thinks it's in a lot of trouble, and therefore the right answer is to limited shuffle, because big shuffles tend to be what desperate governments do, because they think that it's sort of the last card they have to play. And I don't think this is a government that thinks. I don't think this is a government that thinks that they're on their last card. I don't think they think they're close to running out of time.
Do you think that the possibility of leader fatigue could weigh in on the next election? And I mean, in that, Trudeau's been there for a long time, and people, usually after like 3-4 cycles, it's kind of like, okay, we're good. Let's move on. Do you think that's a possibility? I mean, look, the cons don't have a bloody leg to stand on, and Pierre Poilievre is not a leader. That's blatantly obvious. But there's people who will vote for him no matter what, because, well, I'm a conservative and I've always voted conservatives, as evidenced by the Alberta election when Nate Pike came on and told us that he was in a diner and overheard people talking about who you were going to vote for in the upcoming election. And there was a gentleman there with his son seated at the table, whose son is openly gay. And he says, well, I'm going to vote conservative. I've always voted conservative. He's like, but Dad, these people don't want me to exist, but I've always voted conservative. So, are we going to have that? Are we going to have a combination of leader fatigue and people who always vote conservative no matter what? Even if they think Poilievre is the devil, they're still going to vote for the party. Could that play into it? Although, honestly, I think Poilievre is gone before the end of the summer. That's my opinion. I could be wrong.
No, the membership. The thing is, no one, even if there was a push to remove him, the problem is that if you remove him, the membership would either just re-elect him as leader, or would elect Leslie Lewis as leader, which doesn't solve any of your problems. Like the conservative moderate faction needs to like go and figure out why no one seems to care what they have to say before you even try and take back any form of sort of internal power. The thing about like leader fatigue is that like it's survivorship bias, right? Which is we remember the leaders who hung on too long, but we most of the time we don't remember the ones that either succeeded or the ones who could have won another term but rather forced out due to intra-party fighting or just decided they were done, right? Jean Chrétien could have won a fourth election. Paul Martin just got impatient, right?
Yep.
Yes.
David Cameron, I go back to Australian there, to international comparisons, but like, David Cameron had been leader of the Conservative Party for 10 years, and everyone was talking about sort of like the dawn of a Cameron era, and then a year later he's out because he loses the referendum. But like, there's an alternate reality where, Remain wins that referendum. Cameron calls an election in 2017. The Tories win a stonking majority, and he governs for 13 years, and everyone looks at him like a genius. And the thing is, we remember the times when a leader hung on one too many cycles,
right?
And we ignore the fact that like everyone said that Dalton was going to be running up on time, right, after 8 years in Ontario, and then again came a seat short of winning another election. Right. Now Trudeau's going to be coming up on 10, but the problem is Poilievre is crazier than anybody that Dalton had to run against.
Yes,
and at the end of the day. And this is a crude thing to say, but I'll say it because I think it's true. The Conservatives, in the same way that Conservatives in Alberta, like tie goes to Conservatives, right? Which is why the NDP has to go and win an Alberta campaign, as opposed to just like not losing it. The same thing is true in federal elections with the Liberals. tie goes to the Liberals, right? The Conservatives have to go out and actively win this campaign. And the thing is, Poilievre has kind of proven that they can't, right?
Mm-hmm.
Poilievre has shown pretty clearly that he does not have the he doesn't have the makeup to actually go out and win a campaign on his own.
Mm-hmm.
On his own merits, on his own strengths, on his own intellectual capacity. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes, well, let's hope to God that, Canadians just hate Justin Trudeau. But the thing is, again, we come back to the abacus thing of 20% of Canadians like Trudeau, 30% of Canadians want a change in government, but don't like the options available. 50% want to change in government and like the alternatives. How have the Conservatives been so bad, and the NDP too, that 30% of the country is like, I really, really would love to vote against the Liberals. I would really love to not be happy about a Liberal government, but actually I'm still going to have to do this. Because the thing is that people mistake enthusiasm for ferocity for the number of voters, right? No one's particularly enthusiastic about Justin Trudeau anymore. No one's particularly enthusiastic about 10-year prime ministers at any point. But the thing is, it's not about whether we love him or not. It's not about whether his Twitter account is as good as it was in 2015. It's not about whether he was funnier back when he was tweeting at Harper and Mulcair during the magical Blue Jays run of 2015, when there was this weird thing when essentially the only time the Blue Jays could lose was when one of the leaders was at the game, and Trudeau tweets at the two of them being like, "So I think for the good of the nation, we need to stop. We need to come to a pact here, guys." Sure, I don't like Trudeau as much as I did in 2015, but at the end of the day, the thing that costs political parties is that the legislative agenda runs out, right? What did Stephen Harper do with the last 2 years of his majority government? Other than the anti-terror law, which got created and enforced because of a terrorist attack with less than a year left. But what did he do with the last 2 years of his majority government? I'm genuinely asking if you can think of a legislative accomplishment, because I can't.
I would have to put Jeopardy thinking music on an endless loop.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's the thing. Governments run out of a policy agenda. Well, the third term is going to be the most policy-heavy part of the Trudeau agenda.
Right.
Yes.
And if the policy agenda isn't collapsing, then most of the reason people end up voting against long-term governments goes away.
Right.
In which case, a lot of the historical comparisons also cease to be useful.
Well, that brings me to something I discuss with my Scotch and Cigar Club, who is mostly progressive conservatives, and I really push that word progressive because they are, and I've one of the guys absolutely hates Trudeau more than anything else in the world, but he also hates Poilievre, whatever he goes by today. But the thing I asked him was, I said, look, I know you hate Trudeau, and there's plenty, like as you stated earlier, Evan, there's plenty of reasons to attack him. And I agree, there are. But I've asked people time and time again, and I'm like, I know you hate him, and that's fine. Go ahead, hate him as much as you want for whatever those reasons are. But please tell me how any of his policies or legislation has negatively impacted your life. And you know what I get in response? Silence. Every single time from everybody I ask that question. I've not had one person tell me how a single policy or piece of legislation that this government has enacted that has negatively impacted their lives. Not once. So they hate him just because he's Justin Trudeau. And again, like you stated earlier, there are plenty of things we can cut him down for, and there are. But when it comes to his policies and legislation, that ain't it.
The legislative agenda was good, and it was good it was good in the majority parliament, even though, obviously, it wasn't everything. And, electoral reform supporters, wished he would have stuck by the promise. But the thing is that the legislative agenda has been good. And the corruption has been the reason why a lot of people, myself included, have not been able to vote for him the last 2 times.
Mm-hmm.
And if he can just avoid another goddamn corruption scandal, I don't see what Poilievre is going to do to win this. And the thing, I don't like being this confident, but the other thing I don't like is people who don't say what they mean,
Right.
or who, when you DM with them privately, or when you talk to them privately, when you get dinner with them or whatever, have a completely different, set of beliefs about what is likely to happen than what they articulate in public, right? There's the, like any great political TV show or whatever has the, conversation with a reporter where it's on the record, oh yeah, we're very confident that we'll be able to win. Off the record, we're fucked. And the thing that I have tried to do with my writing, and I greatly appreciated, all the kind words you've said about this, about my writing, is the whole thing for me is I want my writing to hold up as an honest reflection of where my head is at any given time. And sometimes that means I'm going to look like an idiot because I'm going to be caught out by changing circumstances, or I'm just going to be flat out wrong. But
and that's going to happen, right? We make
the
mistakes.
message, right? If the sort of operating principle is, if I am too cowardly to say in public what I say and believe in private, then no one should care what I have to say anyways, as I wrote before the 2021 election, then I don't see how Poilievre wins this. I just, the fundamental flaws are too fundamental. He's being advised by an idiot. The campaign he is running is textbook for how to run a competent parliamentary opposition, and absolutely textbook on how not to win an election. And the party, and the thing is, we know that, I mean, the polls, like the other thing is, we got Abacus and Ipsos this week. Well, both of those have a bit of a liberal rally in Ontario, which makes the fundamental question about, are the by-elections correct, or are the polls the correct metric? Well, the polls are now sort of aligning back to the idea that, like, actually Poilievre isn't that popular, and the Liberals aren't as fucked as everyone's thought.
Right. And it's funny because I found it really interesting that the main narrative coming out of the by-elections was that Poilievre was a liability, because I'm pretty sure that the Conservatives did not plan on that, right? So much so that we got a makeover. Just saying. In your piece, Schrodinger's Cabinet Shuffle, you have this passage at the end that really resonates with me. I'm going to read it. It's a little long, but again, violent agreement. The government needs better comms and PR. Clearly, getting caught off guard strictly from a communications perspective on Bernardo is unacceptable, and it should not be taking 2 days for the PM to give denials to what shows up in the Globe. But those are issues of tactics, and they can be fixed. There is nothing inherent in this government that suggests they should suck at comms, so given that, their inability to communicate an overarching message can be fixed. And Evan, I'm with you. The thing that completely frustrates me is them repeatedly tripping over the flowers on the carpet. It seems that as soon as they get a lead in the polls, they absolutely must blow it. I do not know what their issue is. So what does need fixing? This government has been reactive since the convoy. It cannot get on the front foot, and it cannot make the story be their accomplishments and their ideas. A government that dies usually does so because their legislative agenda shrivels up, as you mentioned. But here, this term of government is going to be much more transformative, for good or ill, than the majority parliament. But this government cannot get their heads out of their asses and cannot move forward coherently. The problem comes down to personnel, kind of. Having a minister more interested in doing his fucking job and not having staff not just able, but comfortable hiding information for him at public safety would have for sure helped. But the bigger problem is that Liberals need to stop playing whack-a-mole. The cadence of politics goes that the people dictating the agenda are the side that benefit, and the Liberals have been reacting to an agenda sent by the opposition benches. Absolutely agreed. They're dancing to the tune other people are calling. This government has to lead again. They need to come out with a new ministry and a narrative about how their online news bill and their grocery rebate and their support for Ukraine connect. Because whether the slogan's vacuous or not, Podiev is running every criticism of the government through a central narrative, and he's winning the day most days. That might not matter when the bill comes due and this parliament ends, but why risk it? The Liberals need to start winning some days, and they don't need an entirely new cabinet to do it. What they need is a cabinet, whether ministers are status quo or moved, where people don't make asses of themselves every time they get behind a mic. Get a better centralized communications message and give ministers more room to admit things haven't always been perfect, and the Liberals will cruise back to the front. That's a bold prediction. But I don't think you're off.
I mean, the thing is, it's a bold prediction, but it's also entirely consistent with every piece of international evidence. Like,
yes,
I don't. This is a shit opposition. This is now shit opposition sometimes win because governments are worse, but because I follow international politics, I know the bingo card it's early, so I guess it would be a drinking game with coffee and not with booze, but like I see I see good oppositions and I see bad oppositions, and therefore I have like a database in my head of like comparisons, and I know what a focused opposition that's hitting all the notes and are working together and who are doing the job well. This is a bad opposition. Now, this is a bad opposition that in theory could win if the Liberals sucked, but the problem is the Liberals should be down 10. After the year they have had so far, they should be down 10. One of their MPs has been accused of treason. They've had story after story after story after story on foreign interference. They have been fundamentally unable to get anywhere, and they have a bad economy. They should be down 10.
And
they're
many
down
ethical neighborhoods, as you mentioned.
They're down like 3.5, and they're like roughly tied in Ontario at this point. Give me a break.
Yeah.
They're gonna get any run of not horrible form. They're gonna cruise to the front because this is a shit opposition. And pretending otherwise is delusional.
I had two more questions for you before we go. One was an article that appeared in the Hill Times, and I just want you, after you finish laughing, explain why this person is wrong. But this Nelson Wiseman character basically put out this theory that in Portage Lisgar, the Conservative vote increased by 12%, exceeding the party's collective loss of 9% in the other three ridings. Overall, the Tories remain well positioned to win the next election. I know why this is wrong. And this made me laugh out loud as soon as I heard it. But Evan, please, would you explain to people why this is wrong?
So the Conservative, okay, there's like 14 different things that are wrong with it. So let's try and do this. Let's try and do this in order here. One, you have to include Mississauga, which happened in December, but you have to include Mississauga, which is still really bad news. Two, using the how do I put this politely? Liberals, because people thought Bernier could win, Dippers and some Liberals tactically backed in the Conservatives in an attempt to stop Bernier, because Bernier is viewed as like the bigger of two evils, so that's meaningless.
Right.
But three, more importantly, we don't have an electoral system based on popular votes.
Thank you.
We have a seat-based electoral system. Okay, now you can dislike that we have a seat-based electoral system, but we have a seat-based electoral system. And so long as we have a seat-based electoral system, going backwards in the suburbs and gaining in super safe seats will have the impact of all it will have is the impact of making the Conservative sort of popular vote, the gap between the popular vote that the Conservative lead ends up being, and
Right.
the seat map, it'll just make that gap worse. It'll just make the map even less efficient for the Conservatives than it already is. Because the thing about all of this is that the Conservatives have a really inefficient vote because they have just bled all of this ground in the place where the seats are, the 905, the Golden Horseshoe, take your pick of, verbiage. And they're just maxing out in the prairies. And yeah, sure, great. 12% increase in Portage Lisgar. Fantastic. Great.
Yeah.
What's that get you first past the post? The sum of jack and shit.
Right. It's like a 12% increase in an electoral district that you already own does nothing to help you, especially when you lose vote share in 3 other electoral districts that you need. Gaining 12 in one you already own outright doesn't eliminate the 9% you lost in the other 3 combined, or however it is, right? It's not, we lost 9 in the other 3, but we gained 12 here, so we're better off. It's like, in what reality?
I mean,
like, how badly do you need to be fluffed? See, this is what I'm thinking, is that I'm looking at this. It's like, how bad is this result, and what are your internal polling numbers telling you that you need somebody to write, somebody that's going to agree to put their name and their face to look like this in public, just in order to fluff the party and the leader?
I mean,
don't worry, that wasn't so bad.
I've got some fluff news for you here. Just give me a second.
Could you please let Evan respond?
Go ahead.
I was just going to say.
Okay.
Oh, I'm just before you do, I was just going to say, like, I have lived through a lot of bad by-election spinning of bad by-election results. That might be the worst I have seen. That might be the most intellectually dishonest I have seen in a long time.
Thank you.
Completely agree with you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Grizzly, please.
So this is the fluff tripled. I'm going to have to blow this up so you can read it a little bit better, but give me a second here. MNI, Canadian June employment gains triple forecast. Canadian job creation tripled economists' forecasts in June, adding to evidence the central bank needs to raise interest rates again next Wednesday. 60,000 jobs created. That's a little bit of fluffing, isn't it?
I mean, it's certainly going to make the case that the Liberals are, horrible economic managers when they're going to be able to go into the next election with some extremely gaudy number of new jobs created in this parliament. And realistically, by election day, the inflation's probably going to be at or around 2%. So, but Trudeau, but Pierre Poilievre definitely would have managed the economy better in this period.
Oh, absolutely.
For sure. Definitely a real thing that people will definitely believe. That, has never had a real job in his life. Pierre Poilievre is, this god tier economic manager.
Yeah, likes to try and cozy up to unions and workers, and then the next day says, send them back to work because they're striking.
Yes.
What?
Yeah.
What?
I lied. I have one more tiny question for you before I want to end on something a little lighter. But given that you're here, I need to ask, why do you think Andrew Scheer is still there? Why won't he just die politically already?
Because speaking of people who have never had a job in politics, it's really hard. Like, it's easier for Aaron O'Toole, who is a lawyer and had a career and a life before politics. He can just go back to Toronto and just he's gonna either join a lobbying firm or a law firm and become fabulously rich by the end of this year. Right? He's gonna spend the rest of this year going through his myriad of options. And he has all of these great opportunities available to him as a, former conservative leader, as someone who has insight into how politics works, et cetera, et cetera. He's going to be great. Andrew Scheer has no career except being a politician, except being a political staffer and then a politician. And so for him, dude isn't that old. And like, if you retire at this age with like not really an accomplishment, because remember, wasn't it what was Speaker of the House under the Harper majority,
right?
So he wasn't a cabinet minister. He has legislative priorities that he wants to get done, and he doesn't really have any sort of record of accomplishment other than losing an election.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just wants to hang around because people for whom politics is their everything find it harder to leave, right? The people who come in at 45, who serve 12 years and then can go back to the career that they were doing, or they can just straight up retire if that's what they want to do. Those people find the transition back to like civilian life, for lack of a better way of putting it, easier. But this has been what Scheer has been trying to do his entire life. His entire life has been about trying to get to this place.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's never going to give it up.
Right.
Because at that point, what's he going to do? Like, yeah, the MP's pension is fine. He's going to have plenty of money. Presumably he's banked a shit ton of money too from, the fact that he got, the official opposition leader's, salary for a few years.
And then
from a fundamental level, what is he going to do on from just sheer mechanics of a day-to-day life? What is that man going to do when he leaves Parliament? Because he has no career. He has no prospects. Maybe he goes and sits on the board of Hill and Knowlton or one of those lobbying shops, consultancies. But he can't just move to Toronto and go work for a law firm because A, he ain't a lawyer, and B, even though, sometimes these law firms will hire, advisors who aren't lawyers. O'Toole's like a social liberal who, doesn't make an ass out of himself if he goes and has dinner with people in Toronto. Which is why, by the way, the press corps all had so many nice things to say about O'Toole when he left, because they all like him and they all think that secretly in reality, he's like a moderate conservative. Scheer is not going to be the kind of conservative that endears himself to the corporate conservative crowd, because the corporate conservative crowd are all very pro-gay rights, because a bunch of them are gay, and a bunch of the ones that aren't gay have very good friends who are gay. And so his options are limited, and he's just gonna ride out being an MP for as long as he can, because there's a crisis of identity waiting for him the second he no longer actively cashes a check from the Canadian government.
All right, Evan. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yes.
You've been very, very generous. But before you go, because, petty is my favorite color. I was wondering what your thoughts were on this. Please, Evan, give us your take on the makeover.
So, okay, I'm going to come in at this with a potentially controversial opinion.
Okay.
I feel bad for Pierre Poilievre.
In a way, I do too.
All of this just makes me feel sad because he so clearly wants this so badly, and he's never going to get it, right? Because this is not Pierre Poilievre.
No.
This is not what he looks like. Right. This is not what he wants to look like. But he is willing to subjugate himself and debase himself to such a level to try and obtain power. My only reaction is sadness. My only reaction is to feel a little bit bad for the guy, because this ain't it. Like, this is like a C plot from the thick of it that someone had to go to Iannucci and be like, dude, this is too on the nose. This is too obvious. like, you can't do this. Like, the Conservatives thinking that they lost ground in Oxford and Winnipeg because Poilievre looks too, like, cold. So they're trying to make him seem like more approachable. Fuck this. This isn't your fucking problem. It's not the glasses that make him seem cold and unapproachable. It's the fact that he doesn't have an empathetic bone in his goddamn body.
Yep.
It's the fact that every time he speaks, he's talking about blame. The fact that he blames Justin Trudeau for how divided we are, despite the fact that even something as innocuous as a very obviously staff tweet to Taylor Swift gets his condemnation. Which, by the way, I don't give a shit about Taylor Swift. I don't like her music. I don't care that she's not coming to Canada. Come to Canada or don't. I would announce whether you're coming or not, just to like let people in Canada know, so that they can either like go get seats.
We don't have big enough stadiums.
But I don't care. I don't care about Taylor Swift. I fundamentally do not care. Okay, I do not find her music that interesting, and I find all of the discourse around her to be nauseating. But like, my dude, it's a tweet. It is not that Justin Trudeau cares more about being friends with Taylor Swift than inflation. It's that it's a tweet. It's a joke. It's like a wink and a nod to a bunch of young people who have been like, Justin, what are you doing? How are you solving this for us? It's a joke. It's funny. A bunch of people on TikTok found it funny. It's like an in-joke for the PM, right? And this is how Trudeau has always been. But Poilievre has to take everything so fucking seriously. And it's like, that's your problem, buddy. The problem is that you're a heartless, unfun human being, right? The thing about Trudeau when he won, and even the thing about Stephen Harper, when he got on stage at the NAC and played With a Little Help from My Friends,
Right,
is that Harper could be funny.
Yeah.
Harper could be engaging. Harper could be interesting. Like, he wasn't always that, but he was that enough.
Yeah.
Harper was just like a pretty stereotypically like daddish figure with a daddish sense of humor and like an aw shuck sensibility. And they leaned into it. And that's why, but like, this isn't Pierre Poilievre. What was the biggest mistake Tom Mulcair made? It wasn't the Sherbrooke Declaration or any of that. You know what the biggest mistake he made in the McLean's debate was? The stupid fucking smile he had on his face. The stupid creepy smile. It's like, that's not what Tom Mulcair is. This like, oh, I'm gonna be so nice and I'm gonna try and like, I'm not gonna be angry, Tom, because a focus group told me not to be angry, Tom. No, you're a fucking angry, mean prosecutor. That's you at your best, but I'm gonna try and smile the whole time. No. I feel bad for him because it's just evidence that he doesn't know what he's doing. And clearly the Conservatives are just floundering for any port in a storm if they think this is going to get them anything and this is worth doing. And clearly, whoever is making decisions in that chain of command needs to be fired yesterday.
And I'm glad you mentioned the Taylor Swift thing because Mr. Grizzly, if you would have the asset up. So the Prime Minister did "It's Me High," which clearly is from the chorus of her song, right? Anti-hero. I know places in Canada would love to have you, so don't make it another Cruel Summer.
Banana
using a title. No, but also she has I believe she has a song called Cruel Summer as well. We hope to see you soon. Now, the Conservatives lost their mind about that. Well, let's flash back to June 21st, 2023, when Conservative MP Matt Genereux penned an official grievance letter about the same damned thing. The Prime Minister puts a cheeky tweet where he makes some references to the songs, right? And we talked about it the other day too, on Trevor Noah, when he made a $50 million donation to the Global Life Campaign or the Mandela thing, right? And sent a tweet to Trevor Noah going, "Hey, how about this $50 million for girls' education?" And then everybody lost their minds on that too. So the Prime Minister knows how to work the pop media thing, but they had their own guy And all I'm thinking is that it reminds me again of like when the Prime Minister was at Aga Khan like this, and Rona Ambrose was on the damn boat while they were. It's like, you've done it, you're currently doing it, or you're about to do it, and you're bitching about the other people doing it, and I just don't get it.
Don't look over here, look over there.
I mean, the funniest, like the absolute funniest thing, right, is that Stephen Harper, back when his kid was like young, like I like saw him at like local hockey rinks like a few times, like for specific tournaments, because I would be playing, and in the same like complex of rinks would be Ben Harper's team, and so I remember seeing him, and it's just like, oh, that's like cute. That's like a funny thing, Justin, Stephen Harper, watching his kid play hockey, isn't he so relatable, right? It's like, yeah, he is. That's all it is, right? That's just all you need to say, right? Or when Harper would talk about, when you talk about the fact that, he had to hide his Leafs fandom because nothing could get him in more trouble than admitting, than sort of prioritize or publicizing the fact that he's a Leafs fan, right? But he's from Toronto. Sports fandoms are almost always, inked at a young age, right? Like it's completely reasonable that he is a Toronto fan, right. But like, when it's Jack Layton, doing an event at a bar in Montreal so that he could watch a Habs playoff game in 2011, it's, he's an everyman. But with Trudeau, everyone has derangement syndrome. So it's like, oh no, why is Justin Trudeau prioritizing Taylor Swift over real Canadian? It's like, guys, can we just not be fucking insane about this?
Yeah.
Why is Justin Trudeau taking his bungee jump?
The bar is on the floor, guys.
Yeah.
I'm not asking.
Bring shovels. It's time to limbo. Shovels and a jackhammer. Evan, thank you so much. It's always a joy to speak to you. Hopefully one day we'll have you on when your camera works so we can actually see you.
Was trying to get that working this morning, and it just wasn't operative. But
no worries.
Next time.
Yeah. No, I love your insights, and I just love the fact that we can sit there and we can just have like a plain conversation. Yeah, you know all the big words and you know all the terms and you have all the jargon and whatnot, but you can just we can just sit down and talk about it like we were like having coffee or a beer or something. And it's one of the things I appreciate about having you on the show, because you make it so accessible. And we need a lot more of that.
I mean, that's the value proposition, right? Like a lot of people have opinions about Canadian politics, but the thing that almost nobody else does that I do is no one writes the way I write. And, right. I'm going to be wrong sometimes, I'm going to be right sometimes, but there is a distinctiveness. It would be hard. Yes. It would be hard for you to come across a Scrimshaw piece and like, for, like hypothetically, you didn't see the byline, you didn't see the site, you just started reading the article. You would know it's me. You would know it's my writing. And for good or for ill, that's the currency of the modern day. That's the currency that we're working in, is authenticity and a voice, and that's what I try and do.
For good or for ill, so long as they get your name right. Yeah. So long as they get your name right. Oh man, thank you so very much. The kits, thank you. The comments in the chat are so great. Here, I'm glad I woke up for it. Thanks, Evan. Enjoy your writing. I love listening to you. This was a great conversation. I guess, and then all throughout the chat, there was like comments going, "Yeah, Evan's right. I agree with Evan. I agree with Evan." So, the kits really love what you have to say, and we appreciate you making time for us as generously as you do. All right. Thanks so much, Evan.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye. Wow.
Well, that was awesome.
That was awesome. we got a lot of time too. I didn't think we were going to get that much with him, but I went through absolutely. I mean, I made a long list of topics.
Mhm.
I went through absolutely every one I had.
Well, you should be proud and happy of that, sir. I didn't have as much to say today as I normally would because I thought it important. I'll chime in once in a while when I have a thought in my head, which is not that often. But you two gentlemen are much better at that conversation than I will ever be. So that's why I kind of hung back for a lot of it because I'll chime in when I want to and when I feel I have something to say. But yeah. That was great. That was well done. Like it's listening to two folks who really know what they're talking about, and again, bringing it down to a level that everyone can understand. That's important.
Yeah, because you got to get rid of the noise.
Yes,
you got to get rid of the noise. Like there are people that are actively paid to inject noise into the discussion, right? So
well,
it's like, what's your?
We don't want any part of that. We want to, from day one, facts first. Let's try and make it approachable and understandable for everybody and get the information out there because like we've said time and time again, people don't have the time. They'll read a headline and then get enraged because Skippy's won that nanosecond, which is all he ever wants to do because he has no policy. It's Trudeau bad, me good, I'll do better, remove the gatekeepers, but be a gatekeeper. Global inflation is Justin Trudeau's fault. Like, yeah, I could go on for an hour with the shit that comes out of that idiot's mouth. And my disdain for Polyev is well, it's pretty heavy duty. Let's not kid ourselves. But having two gentlemen that could sit here and really spell it out simply and bring it down to brass tacks and make it understandable and approachable. And as you can hear from everybody in the chat, they're like, "Thank you, Evan. Thank you. Thank you for this," and it helped to engage a lot of the listeners and viewers, I think, today. And hopefully, it will do the same thing when I put up the 5 audio podcasts later today from this past week that I haven't had a chance to get to.
Yeah, we have Kit Mr. Gal that says, "I hear that, Mr. Grizzly, and you still brought in good salient points as well. Love this one."
Oh, thank you.
So there you go. And other comments there, Kitlin M. Sometimes I disagree with Evan, and sometimes I hope he's not right about some things. I completely feel you, Kitlinda. But his writing is always insightful. Kit James, I only agree with Evan like half the time, but you can't deny his craft.
Right. And as I said at the top of the show, I don't always see eye to eye with him. And I'm not going to see eye to eye with every single human being. It's just not possible. No. Nuance and different life experience, different lived experience, but I always respect his writing. And he's one of my favorite political commentators because he's always got something salient points, accurate. And he'll say, "Hey, I fucked up. I got it wrong."
Well, and
which
that'll
we
make
really
you think.
appreciate.
And that'll make you think, well,
it's the authenticity factor, right?
Right. Well, I mean, the day after the Alberta election, he was saying just like Rachel Notley absolutely has to resign now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she hasn't.
No, she won't.
So, I mean, that's a bold take.
Mm-hmm.
He went out there. Okay, she didn't. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that he said she must. So it doesn't mean that the must part is not true. It's just that it doesn't seem so obvious to the NDP Alberta that she should. Now, the question for her is whether or not she becomes Andrea Horwath and runs in the third election and also doesn't decide to show up to fight and decides to fight. Well, I mean, she doesn't have the option of fighting with a third party because there is no third party. So, but not actually taking the swing, and hoping that after 4 more years of UCP bad will be enough, or will she actually try and win the damn thing?
And you know what she did? That I think her fatal mistake in this election, this campaign, was something that Nate says. Danielle has to stay on script, and Rachel needs to go off script,
right?
Because she's very good at that. And I think if she had have gone off script and told her handlers, "No, I'm talking,"
she needed
right
to
now.
Trust herself.
Yes. And I think that was a big mistake on her part because, when Nasheed Nenshi, a former Calgary mayor, came out in support of her and said point blank, "We don't see eye to eye on everything, but I'm going to call her out on good policy and I'm going to call her out on bad policy, things that I don't agree with. And I'm going to give her my support because she's the best choice for Alberta." and a lot of prominent conservatives came out and did the same thing.
Yeah.
Supported NDP candidate for premier because they know she was the best for the province. And when I got into it a couple of weeks ago with somebody about how I said, listen, I am concerned for the province of Alberta. And so many people a couple people supported me, but more people came out of the woodwork going, fuck off, stay in Ontario. You don't know anything. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, well, first off, I lived in Alberta for 7 years. Both my sisters were born there. I have friends, family, and colleagues there. So my concern is genuine because I'm a Canadian citizen. I'm not an Ontario citizen. Yeah, I live in Ontario. I live in Ottawa. But I'm a Canadian citizen first and foremost, always. So my concern for the welfare of friends, family, colleagues, and people I don't even know in the province of Alberta is genuine because I'm watching Danielle Smith take apart our public health care and privatize it. And it's going to kill people. And it's going to, what is David Moscrop says? They're punching down again. They're punching down on the poor, the working class, and the disenfranchised. They're going to die, and she doesn't give a shit.
Nope, not at all. Mr. Grizzly, do we have a show?
We do indeed, sir.
Yeah, we got a heck of a show. We're getting close to 3 hours here. Jeez. Wow. When you get to geek out with another geek, right, on a topic that you both love geeking out about,
well, when the conversation flows as well as it does, let it go. Let it flow, man.
I could have kept going maybe for another hour. I mean,
I know.
When he was saying, I was actually notes. It's like, oh, I should ask about this. So I asked everything I wanted to ask. I asked a couple of other things. And now that I'm thinking about the conversation, it's, damn, why didn't I ask him about his prediction about Rachel? Why didn't I ask him whether or not Rachel set herself up to Horvath again? Why didn't I ask him, I guess, why didn't I ask about Ensicop and what the two conservative MPs when we were talking about on foreign, what they see and how they relate the story back and why that's never made the news, whatnot, because I'm sure he's got great insights on all of these things, and I'm sure
that's why we'll bring him back.
I'm going to be going, I should have asked this too. I'm going to be having V8 moments. Right?
Put them in point form in a notepad or OneNote and save it for the next time we have him on. Because
because it's so stimulating talking about something you geek out about, that you're really interested in or a passion of yours, with someone else who's equally passionate about it. And, I mean, it turns out that we're in violent agreement on many things like this, but I think the conversation would have been equally as fascinating had we been in violent disagreement on all of these things.
Oh yeah.
Because he brings the goods.
Yeah.
Right?
You'd be engaged no matter what.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Kids. I'm a happy beaver. That's the end of this episode of the Daily Beaver podcast. We hope you love listening to us because we love making this for you. Remember that sharing is caring and a word of mouth is priceless. So let your peeps and poops know about us. And as Kit James says, see you on Casual Friday, Douglas. I will be there. And I have missed you, my friend. I have missed you so much. So it'll be nice to see your face. Because democracy is something that you do, please take some time to donate to the Red Cross if you have a couple of extra loonies, shaking in your pockets, because our family needs it. Right? The thing that you said, right, that you're a Canadian first. It's like, yes, we're Canadians first, regardless of the province or territory in which we live.
Period.
All right. If you really like this podcast, you can find us on the Crier Media Network, as well as all Beaver Grizzly friendly platforms. And if your platform is not Beaver Grizzly friendly, why the heck are you on it? We need to talk about your life choices. All right. We love to hear from you. Reach us on our Facebook at True North Eager Beaver, our Twitter feed at True Eager, or by email via truenortheagerbeaver@gmail.com. And by the way, any kids who may have been seeing my tweets on our feed, because some person some troll account got us suspended for 12 hours by basically appealing to the algorithm by saying that we promoted content that encouraged suicide, and that one just gets you boom right off the bat.
What?
Yeah. I sent that person a tweet and I said, this is how you tweet. This is your life now. I said, go block yourself instead of go fuck yourself. And that guy decided to say, well, that means, you said go kill myself because it's your life now. Anyway, the algorithm got you, right? But that same account got suspended yesterday.
Well, karma.
Come
You
for
mess with the queen.
Thank you, minions. Kitty minions. If you happen to have a hand. Now, I'm not saying I'm responsible for anything that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Not at all. Because I said it would be a terrible shame if something like that should be happening. And absolutely, people should do absolutely nothing to make sure that that happened.
Reported.
I'm just so anyway. You can subscribe to our pod page, podpage.com/the True North Eager Beaver, all in lowercase letters with a hyphen between each one of those words. I'm seeing Kit Saucy giving me the angel emoji. Why not also subscribe to our True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated YouTube channel? That helps us out big time. Yes, there was another person. The reason why I got upset, the one thing I don't like on Twitter is people putting you on lists.
Yeah, I just go remove them immediately.
I remove them immediately too. But it's like, you know who really liked putting people on lists? 1939?
Yeah.
To 1945? So I don't like that. So you have a problem with something I want to say, send me a trash tweet. But don't put me on a list, say Trudeau piss drinkers, for example. And then get all your friends to start monitoring me. And then have them all there so you can give them a cue to a swarm like this. Got no time for that. Okay. Why? So yes, if you are watching us on our True North Eager Beaver Media Incorporated YouTube channel, well then, please make like Kit Elaine and smash that button. Mr. Grizzly, I was thinking we should maybe try and get a recording of Kit Elaine saying, hey, this is Kit Elaine. Remember to smash that button. We could just play that. Yes. If Kit Elaine would be willing, that is. We can't do this without your kind and generous support, and you have been very kind and generous to us over the last couple of days. So thank you very much, Kits. If you would like to continue that, we certainly won't object. Not at all. If you feel we've done a particularly good show, if you loved this interview, if you feel that we've knocked it out of the park this week, please scan the QR code that Mr. Grizzly will put up close to his head, and that will bring you to our emergency hot chocolate Caesar, Guinness, and coffee fund that keeps us hydrated so that we can keep on producing these shows for you, which you seem to enjoy. So thank you very much. And if you are listening, then our fund is at Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/eagerbeaver, lowercase letters, all in one word. And that's where you can go to make your donation. So, and we very, very, very much appreciate it. Wednesday, I saw a hashtag that said shameless self-promotion Wednesday. So I said, well, hey, let's try it. And I said, shameless self-promotion, here, give us a tip. And somebody did. So
well, we were added to a list while we were on the show on Twitter. Yeah, I'll show you. I'm going to show you the list. I don't want to read it because it's really vile. So if you're listening, I apologize that there's no. Maybe you can put it in the description, sir. I'm not going to read this, but I'll just show you the graphic here. So that's who put us on a list, and what they did was this person right here. He went and I've had him blocked for a while because he's just a vile human being. He put us on this list, and what he did was he took all of our tweets, all of our live Twitter. How the show is broadcast on 4 different Twitter platforms. He took all of them, retweeted them, and put us on that list. So I just went in and immediately removed the list, blocked him, and we should probably report this fella.
Yep.
Because he's a pretty horrible human being. Phil McCracken. Yeah.
At what?
It's, let's see, at your mom's vagine.
Oh, I bet you he Frenches his grandmother with that tongue.
I'll put there's his Twitter handle right there in the chat. If anybody wants to address that, I'll leave that up to you. Kind of, one of these just horrible people. There's lots of them out there.
Again, I keep on saying, this is your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Your parents must be so proud.
Yeah. Yeah, I just go
Because
in.
America was like, I immigrated from Poland with like $2 in my pocket so that you could do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Jeez. From the Beaver Lodge, this is your Eager Beaver saying, until next time, dear kids, it could be a tough world out there, so please be kind to and gentle with yourself. And I'm going to give some words of wisdom first. Don't be a film kraken.
Don't do that.
Nobody likes that guy.
No.
Don't be that guy.
Don't be that guy.
Really, nobody likes that guy. Mr. Grizzly, do you have some words of wisdom?
Yeah, because of that thing we just experienced a moment ago, I'm going to say venture out today in this world and smile at everybody you see and be kind to everyone. And maybe you'll discover, because not everybody is capable of it, but maybe you'll discover that when you smile at people and you show them some kindness and compassion and caring, you get more from it than you give to them.
Mm-hmm. Truer words. Mr. Grizzly, please roll those credits and send us off into the weekend.
I'm just a few hours from my vacation.
I know. You are listening to a True North Eager Beaver media podcast. The True North Eager Beaver podcasts are proudly brought to you by our founding sponsors, the Miss V Mysteries from Corvid Moon Publishing, your source for science fiction, fantasy, and cozy mysteries featuring a broad diversity of characters. CanadianTarot.com, your uniquely Canadian online eclectic tarot community and forum. And The Peppermaster, hot pepper sauces made from fresh farm ingredients to thrill your taste buds and expand your mind. All right. Show us that Easter egg. I'm anxious.
I got a little graphic here. This regards to the latest social media thing that started yesterday. They got to 1 million subscribers in under an hour. I think they're at like 50 million right now. Anyway, it's the title of this new social media platform. I'm on it. Of course I am. It's this. It's called Threads. Ooh, the Project Runway gays and the drag queens are going to slay this new app or anything to do with Thread.
Yes. Gee.
Yeah,
the only way
queen.
The only way you could have made it better is if you called it swatches. Fashion, darling. Fashion.
All right.
Fashion. Always fashion.
I am 6 hours away from my vacation.
Sir, enjoy it. You have freaking earned this.
I think so.
Enjoy every millisecond.
I will. All righty. Oh, and right. Just one more message. I meant to put this out and I forgot, and I'll think about it. If anybody happens to be around Ottawa on Saturday, and if you want to venture down to the Lieutenant's Pump at 361 Elgin Street, where we always do our monthly live pub shows, I'm going to be hanging out in the patio to have a couple of birthday celebration beer, because I just didn't, the whole, it's been a...
Yep.
Stuff.
There was a lot going on.
So if anybody wants to swing by Saturday afternoon, I'll be there around 2-ish, maybe a little bit earlier. Swing by and say hello, stop in, have a pint, or maybe a nosh or whatever. That's where I'll be.
I so wish I could be there.
No worries, brother. No worries. Next time. All righty.
All right.
See ya.
All right. Peace.